accept Amador as a county entity without individual city representation. And I think some of that might have had to do with the past and the way Amador was represented in the past, but given the size of the county and the ability to bring to bear voting power on the board, it was just voted by the board to introduce a single entity, which is the norm. There's only two cities that are spelled out. One is Angels Camp and one is Sonora. And those are legacy members that have been in for a long time. But at this point in time, the board has voted and recommended to accept Amador as a single voting entity. Well, two, because of the civilian member as well.
For those, the public members, each county board of supervisors also appoints a public member. Was that always part of the equation?
It was. It was.
What was the general purpose in having public members?
Well, I think it's in recognition that the elected officials have a responsibility to their constituency, but then economic development is really targeted on helping the businesses in the community, and so each community has, every jurisdiction has a voting business member typically on the board, so that it's not all elected officials.
As long as, I don't have any objection, as long as it is a business member who can represent the interests of the business community.
So the way the JPA is set up, this Board of Supervisors can designate your public member. So if you choose, whatever your guidelines are for, as you just described, if you want a business member and a particular business member, this group can select that member.
Well, we'll have to do that. Maybe not right now, because we haven't really put the analysis
Right, so right now we're just voting to ratify the amendment to the JPA that would allow, that indicates Amador's formal intention to join the JPA, and then it would require a 2/3 vote of the other members, which would then, I would go to the other members and talk to them and go through a similar process with their elected officials, elected bodies, and get them to approve.
Okay, so the stage we are now, we need to vote again on joining? I'm a little confused.
So what the action you took previously
Yes.
was to direct staff, was to signal your intent to rejoin.
Yes.
They went out, they asked their board.
Right.
They brought back the amendment that you now have to approve.
Right.
To officially rejoin you to.
Gotcha.
So yes, you have to vote.
Okay, one thing I would like, Dave, is for you to talk a little bit about well, first of all, you're aware that this county does not have an economic development director.
Right.
And so what could we gain, from joining? Could we get some help grant writing? What could the district give us, so to speak?
Fair question. And so there's sort of three main categories, I would say, where there's an ROI or some sort of benefit that you would see. And the first is that we do, since our agency has a footprint in all of the same counties where Central Sierra Economic Development operates, we can serve as a common thread between all the counties. So just last week, for instance, I held a meeting of all the economic development directors in the Central Sierra region, and we met for half a day and we talked about what we're doing in each county, but then that allowed the various counties to share best practices and to look at how maybe counties could help each other, and where there's expertise in one county, help another county, where there's resources that can be cross-referenced as well. And so we can also look at joining forces regionally. We met and talked about conducting a workforce development summit sometime in July that would encompass all the counties. So kind of a convening and coordination effort is one thing that we provide. Another is we do outreach directly to businesses, and we find support for businesses. We got a grant a couple years ago from the USDA for $50,000 to do training for businesses, and the Small Business Development Corporation is up here doing those trainings, and it's mainly for Calaveras. It was connected to the USDA grant was something that could have been included with Amador, but if so, then there would be SBDC members up here giving classes to businesses, outreach to businesses to talk about what sort of funding mechanisms are available and various other support things. And last but not least, the third thing I think is grant writing. And in the last couple years, we've done this USDA grant for $50,000, another $250,000 grant through the EDA that was attached to the Butte fire damage and recovery, and we used that to create the Calaveras Business Resource Center in San Andreas, which is a collaboration between economic development and the Chamber of Commerce and workforce development in one, creating a center where businesses can go and get support and resources. That was done through a Central Sierra Economic Development grant. And again, since Amador was in the Butte fire footprint, that could have benefited Amador as well. We're writing a grant right now for, I think it's due April 30th, so we don't know exactly. We have a whole week to finish it, but $200,000 for the USDA, for a USDA grant to look at business development in the area around biomass processing and perhaps ag subsidies for timber that could help us build affordable housing. So that's one that we're putting in right now under the auspices of Central Sierra Economic Development District. So yes, we can write grants, and we can do them regionally, whereas there are some grants that would not be available to you on a county level.
A question, in the last 10 years, roughly how much have you brought into your agency in the way of grants?
So
Dollar-wise.
I will, right now, we had intended to have the previous director here to talk about what happened prior. I've been on board since July. I know about the last two big ones we've done, the 50,000 and the 250. I don't know for the last 10 years, and I could find that information and report back to the board, but I don't have that information with me right now.
Dave, I'd like you to share the fact that we here in Amador are looking at co-joining other organizations in one location, like has been done in San Andreas.
Right.
And because I'm on the Amador Community College Foundation board, that would be one that Mother Lode Job Training would join with. And then the other would be the Chamber, if the Chamber chooses to join. And so talk in general, because Amy, your staff person, came to came to the Amador Community College Foundation and told us it's kind of a theme for agencies with common missions or related missions to join together in one location. Would you talk about that a little bit?
So in keeping with the Calaveras Business Resource Center that was created, that sparked some interest in neighboring counties and to do more than just outreach between partners. We're looking at forming alliances and maybe even co-locating like we did there. And so we formed, it was called the Amador Workforce Education Alliance. I think they just call it the Amador Alliance now. And that's an alliance that is it's just being formed, and we're looking for a place to perhaps co-locate that involves the Amador Adult Ed organization, the Chamber of Commerce under Jamie Armstrong, and also wearing her economic development hat, the Amador Community College Foundation, and we have a board member, as you mentioned, on that foundation, and then us representing regional workforce development and economic development, so under Central Sierra. So that alliance meets on a regular basis. We've already been doing some initiatives, a culinary boot camp at Jackson Rancheria, and some other things that really present themselves when you have a strong alliance like that. Whereas if everybody kind of, retires to neutral corners, it doesn't really have the same effect. So, and now Mariposa and Tuolumne want to do the same thing, which are our two other counties on our service area, and it's becoming a very proven and successful model for economic development.
And I understand that agencies that are providing grants prefer to see mergers like that.
They do. That's the trend at the state level. Kim Doble-Van is the head of the USDA for California. She's going to be coming to Tuolumne County on the 30th to do a housing summit, and she's also very supportive of regional rural partnerships that we're doing here in the area, and has also committed to coming to our economic development summit. And so those regional economic development alliances are in favor with the state and the feds, and have proven themselves, and that's the way we're doing our grant writing right now is with that in mind.
Tim Van is also Stella County Supervisor in Colusa County. So,
Yep.
she's a friend to.
I'm sure you all know her.
Yes.
Yep.
Questions by the board? Any other questions? Then I'll take public comment. Any public comments, questions for Mr. Taney? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Just a real quick clarification,
Yes.
because I don't think we made it clear exactly what was going on. So we are ratifying this today. The unanimous approval that I was talking about before was the board of the JPA. And
Right.
then it does have to go back to each individual member of the JPA so that their individual boards can approve it as well. So
Oh, they're individual boards of supervisors?
yes.
Oh, interesting, okay. I have a public comment right behind you here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Sherry Curtis, and I wish to have you think a little more thoroughly about what this actually means. In our Constitution, I don't think that we have a section for economic development. Economic development in government always means, when it comes from government, public monies being spent to help private businesses. And we have in our county many, many needs to have our monies be going out into cooperation, which is fine, but to put our monies out there, no. I don't think that's wise. I didn't vote for my Board of Supervisor candidate to take money out of Amador County. I expected that when people voted for you guys, that the monies would be here respectfully allocated to public services, not to become a private banking system for certain business activities. We have already put much money into helping business in our county. I do not really think it's up to us to increase another government entity which needs to be funded. A district is a government entity which requires tax monies to keep it going. The role of government is to provide public services. And I just want to ask you to try to remember what happened in the Solenda case. When we start giving grant monies, which, by the way, are our public tax dollars at the federal level, but we're all paying this. The Solenda case should have taught us something. It reduces competition because you're helping one business and another business in the same business doesn't get grant monies from the government. So it's a very serious increase in government cost and power. You also disenfranchise your voters, and no wonder the feds like it. No wonder the state likes it. It's because the voters of your county cannot do anything about it. We can't control whatever debts are issued by the group. We do not know how each of the other counties and cities, how their financial accountabilities are, or what debts they still have to pay. We don't know how they manage it. I would rather make sure our monies stay here and work together as a service. That's what we're supposed to be doing, aren't you, is to be a service to the people. But I think we've forgotten the people in the counties, the homeowners, the retired people, should not be charged to help private businesses. So
Please
I
wrap it
just
up now.
hope that you will take another look, because I know Sonora had high debts left from an economic development procedure, and I don't want to have to pay any of their debts. I want the money to stay here. We need roads, and we need raises for some of our employees. We need to protect us. I thank you very much.
Dave, it might be appropriate for you to respond with what the money situation is from our county.
Sure. So there is already a cost-sharing structure in place, and so we're looking at proposing that Amador fit into that existing cost structure, and it equates to about 16 cents per resident, non-prison population residents. And so with Amador's 35,000 or so non-prison citizens, it would be $5,800 is the dollar amount that we're asking for, which is less than some counties pay and more than others because of the population basis. So,
Thank you. Annie, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I would almost like to see us brought back possibly, and with maybe it'd be nice to have a list of the last 10 years of grants received and or funding received and amount thereof. That'd be very helpful to have that information. Kind of see what their track record is accomplished.
can I interject?
Please, yes.
The ROI isn't only measured in grants received. We perform an alignment and outreach function as well, which isn't going to be shown in hard dollars, but could be gathered by talking to local businesses and others that where we serve, and the local economic development directors, where we serve as an alignment function and a coordination function and an empowerment function. So, but we'll be happy to provide the grant money, the grant history for the board.
A little more background information would be nice.
Remembering that we haven't been a member, so we won't see much directly coming, and we won't see anything directly coming back to Amador County.
We were a member.
Yeah, but we haven't been as a...
Not since 2014.
Could also maybe break that out in the last 10 years. So say 2014, you got probably about 6 years there where Amador was a member. It'd be nice to know realized through our payments or in your efforts or your predecessors' efforts.
Sure. To the extent that I could break it out by county, I'll do that.
Board?
I have a question on the financing on page 4. It does say that the member shall provide the cost of admin of the district until a federal grant is received for that purpose. But it goes on to say that if or when the U.S. Economic Development Administration or other funding sources provides grant funds for the district with members to supply local matching funds of whatever proportion. So I just want our representatives to be very careful on that, because besides the initial 58, I think you said $100.
5,800.
it sounds like there may be requests for other money to be matching for other projects down the road.
So I can give some background on that. Until recently, the Central Sierra Economic Development District was a fully funded district within the EDA, and the EDA does all their grants on a matching basis. And the prior director, Larry Cope, who is the economic director for Tuolumne County, was matching that EDA grant with part of his salary. And that's the way the match was accomplished. And his board took a vote that they didn't want him spending, I think it equated to about 40% of his time from a matching standpoint in working across counties. They wanted him to focus more on Tuolumne County, which is how they ended up putting the whole thing up for RFP and how we responded. So what that means is, since we're a federally funded agency, we can't match funds with the feds, and so the district has been defunded. It's in a suspended state right now, which means it's not an official EDA district anymore, but it's funded through the counties. So there's a total of $25,000 between it would be 5 counties, and that pays for my efforts, a deputy director who writes grants, and various members of my staff who do business outreach. So it's self-funded now. It's not matched through the EDA, and that matching portion would only apply if we decided to go rejoin the EDA and find a way to provide matching funds.
So that was an in-kind match from Larry?
It was an in-kind match by calculating part of Larry's salary. I think it added up to $70,000. And then the other 70 came from EDA in the form of real money, and so it was a $140,000 grant. That was a planning grant. It allowed Larry to traverse the 4 or 5 counties and do planning with local economic development directors.
The economic development plan for the region, then, with the SWOT
Right.
analysis and all of that?
So the result of that is there's what's called a SEDS, which is a comprehensive economic development strategy, which was developed just last year for 5 years, and that was done through collaboration with the member counties and also through public input. And it talks about what the key priorities are and what the objectives are. There's 9 objectives that have been identified, and then we execute on those objectives as the highest priority efforts that we do. I won't try to convey the 70-page document right here, but
the
Well,
process that you follow for this, it's kind of laid out by EDA, what
Yeah.
you have to do.
yeah, EDA requires a
What goes
SEDS
into
for
that, yeah.
for any district, but having it is good for us to apply for grants in other areas as well, to have this SEDS
So
in
since
place.
it's sounding like, based on Supervisor Oneto's request, that we're probably not going to take a motion right now, have a motion on approving the amendment to have us join, I would like to ask you to come back to provide more detail, as Supervisor Oneto asked, and I'd love to see you go through the 9 elements that you've identified in that
Sure.
plan.
Sure, be happy to.
That would be great.
Okay.
One more thing that'd be helpful. The USDA has a pot of money that's available if you have a SEDS, is that correct?
It doesn't require SEDS, but yes, it helps if you
Oh,
have one. It
so-
shows that we're an organized district with clear objectives and priorities.
And I think it'd be nice to know what that pot of money is. I think it may have been augmented in 2018 due to all the disasters, but it'd be kind of nice to know how much historically, it might be too hard to find, but if you could find historically what that number of money, that amount of money that's been available is nice, because I remember a number of years back, we'd kind of looked at it and said for a number of jurisdictions or counties, I can't remember exactly what it was, that were seeking that pot of money, it was kind of a needle in a haystack, I thought, a little bit.
It is, and that's why that's another function we perform, is we know how to navigate the haystack, and we've reached out to Kim Van directly, and she and her staff are sort of giving us some guidance on what the right parameters would be for applying for the grant. I know Alpine County just applied for a USD grant, so the individual counties can also apply for USD grants in addition to the Central Sierra. The Central Sierra would do more of a regional type grant, and every individual county can do their own USDA grant apps as well.
Right, but again, for Amador, we don't have an economic development director to do that, and it's much more likely that a regional organization would receive the grants. So,
Thank you.
Sure.
thank you, Dave, and
Thanks, sir.
Does
Thank you.
Central Sierra do any local grant writing at all for individual counties, or is that always left to their local economic development
That came up at
director?
the economic development meeting we had last week. Because we have experience writing grants and we know how to do that, and especially my deputy director, and so we could make ourselves available to write grants on behalf of the individual counties. Depends on how complicated it is.
right, and how many of the counties all want that particular service?
My deputy director is very popular right now.
I bet. Well, thank you for coming, and
Okay, thank you.
we hope to. Do you think you'll be ready to come to our next board meeting with this information?
Sure, absolutely.
Great.
When is the next board meeting?
Just
I
looking.
say that without knowing what.
It's May 8th.
May 8th.
Okay. Can I look at my calendar? real
Sure,
quick?
of course.
So as long as I'm in town, I'll be available. Let's see, May 8th, I am and will be available.
Okay, we'll put you on the agenda again.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, thank you. So do you want me to give the Motherload job training overview at that time?
Yes, would you
Okay.
please?
All right, sure. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, let's go to item 6B, Amador Arts. Discussion and possible action relative to a presentation by Ms. Tara Forget, Amador Arts Executive Director, relative to a recent work by Amador Arts in the community and a request for funding in the 2018-19 budget.
Good morning, Supervisors.
Morning.
Morning.
Good to see all of you. Thanks for having us. Megan O'Keefe, our Program Director, and now real workhorse of the organization. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for having us here today. I wanted to take the opportunity to just update you about what our organization has been doing recently and some of our plans for the future. Over the past 5 years, our organization has grown significantly, but we also continue to do some of our most important programs and work in the community. This year will be the 20th year of TGIF free summer concerts, and we have some extra fun events planned to make those concerts a celebration of that 20 years. It's also the 21st year of our Wine Fest event in Sutter Creek. So those are some long-established events that we continue to grow. We've also been doing some new things, though. What I want to talk about today is the first ever Art Summit of Amador County that we hosted last month at the Jackson Rancheria. It was well attended by about 65 community leaders, which included the EDs from the Chamber of Commerce and the Council of Tourism, Maureen Funk and Jamie Barger, the editor of the Ledger Dispatch, Caitlin, back there. We also had the president of the school board, Susan Ross, in attendance, and the superintendent, Amy Slavinsky, as well as quite a number of local artists, business owners, teachers, our board members. It was a great event. It included student performances, which were very impressive. We also showed 2 Student Voices videos, which is a project through the California Alliance for Arts Education, in which our student directors from Amador and Argonaut High School produced videos, which actually won 1st and 3rd place prizes at the state level. So we showed those at the event, celebrated the work of our students. We also recognized Giles Turner for 50 years of service with a little award and presentation. But the main event of the day was Breakout Groups, in which we sorted everyone into 3 discussion groups to talk about some major opportunities for the arts going forward. Those groups were arts education, which is obviously a very important part of our work. And that group was led by a representative from the California Alliance for Arts Education, a state agency that we work with. We had a group that discussed tourism and the arts economy, which was led by Emily Terapelli and Bailey Burton from the Rancheria and Maureen Funk from the Council of Tourism. That group discussed ways for our organizations and businesses to all work together to create events that were infused with the arts rather than creating new events, because we all know there's a lot happening here in Amador County. And then the third group was discussing the possibility of creating a Center for the Arts here in Amador County, which has been kind of buzzing the last couple of years. We've heard different people talking about the need for a performing arts center space. So we now have a steering committee that was formed at that event that is meeting on a monthly basis and exploring the possibility of creating something like that here in Amador County. So the Art Summit was a fantastic event, brought a lot of people together to talk about what we're working on. But more than anything, highlighted to us how much more can be done, how much room there is for our county to grow in terms of the arts and arts events and arts education, but also how much more there is for our organization to do and grow. So we are here today to ask you to help support us in meeting some of those new opportunities like arts education, the Center for the Arts, and working with local businesses to grow those arts economy events. So we would like to ask you to consider supporting Amador Arts to the tune of $5,000 in your next budget. That will not only help us to increase our attention to these new opportunities, but funding from our county government coming to the Amador County Arts Council will right away increase our standing with the State Arts Council and make it possible for us to get even larger grant funding from the State Arts Council. When we apply every year for that state and local partnership program, which we ask for your support in by designating us as the Amador County Arts Council, they rank all of the arts councils, and your funding is based on your rank from 0 to 10. And one of the main questions that they ask when you apply for that program is, do you receive funding from your county or city government? And up to now, we've obviously had a great working relationship with the Board of Supervisors, but we haven't been able to tell them that we received that funding. And if we can, whatever you decide is appropriate, that immediately is going to bump our rank up. And then that larger grant funding just allows us to leverage that and to do more in the county. So thank you for your consideration. Do you have any questions for me about what we're working on?
Funded you last year, correct?
No, we have not been funded in my memory. We come to you every year and we ask for designation as the local partner to the State Arts Council, but we have not asked for funding in the time that I've been with the organization.
There was some funding for them back in 0203 was the last time we've given funding to this.
How much was that? Do you know?
It was
Chuck?
$3,000.
Okay. Richard?
I think we can consider this in our budget hearings that we have. The one thing I don't like to see is that when we give money to organizations, for those organizations to put it into scholarships. To me, those scholarships, I'd like to see the money, if it comes from the county, go into programs.
Noted, yes. We would be happy to do that. We do a few scholarships to high school seniors, but generally that's something that individual donations fund adequately. So we would love to put your funding directly into programs or whatever you see fit.
Yeah, I'm not against scholarships. I hate to see county money going in and then turning around and you giving a scholarship in the name of the Amador Arts Council. Our board does that, but we take money out of our discretionary accounts to fund the scholarships.
Understood.
Question, do you receive funding from the cities, any of them?
We don't currently. For a few years, we were receiving some TOT funding from the city of Jackson when we were doing an after-school program there in partnership with ACRA, but we have not asked for that funding for 2 to 3 years. I'd have to check my books on that.
said it was helpful, was like basically a box you check if you receive funding from like a city or county.
The most significant is if it's your governing agency. So for us, that would be the Board of Supervisors. It is great when we can tell them that we get something like TOT funding from cities, but even more significant would be funding from our Board of Supervisors.
Is there a required level?
No. Yes. Any other questions?
Board questions? Questions?
You know, I think it's something, you gotta be careful what precedents you set, but if it'd be helpful to them, it's something like Richard was saying, we can look at the budget of, so they could check that box and say they're getting funding, whatever amount it may be.
Well, we appreciate that. $5,000 would be a big help to our programs and our staffing, so we'd appreciate that, but anything that you can give to us is a great start for us.
So just for your information, our budget workshop is on May 15th.
Yes, I
And
understand.
so it sounds like the board would like to put this issue over to then. And if either one of you or both of you have the opportunity to come, that might be great in case we have questions.
Okay, certainly.
So, but I am supportive of what you guys do.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Morgan.
Is there a particular time that they would show up?
Yeah,
during
I'll
the
get you a
process?
schedule for, I'll put a schedule together for approximate time.
Right.
Approximate time, right?
It'll be approximate time.
That way you don't have to sit there for hours and
To
hours
hear
and
about
hours.
public works funding. And
We appreciate that. May 15th?
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll check back and get a time, and we'll make sure someone's there to answer questions.
Great.
Okay, thank you so
Very
much
good.
for your time.
Thank you.
All right.
You have a new little baby, right?
Ew. She might even be out there in the halls somewhere.
She's already growing.
She's
Yes.
already won.
Oh, gosh.
Time
amazing.
flies.
It does.
Yes, but
Well,
she
good.
keeps me very busy, so that's why Megan is the new face of Amador Arts.
Great. Thanks and
Thank you.
congratulations.
All right.
Yes, any public comment? No? Mr. May, you're not going to comment on that?
moving
You're
seats.
just moving toward the front. Okay. 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 We'll move to item 6C, discussion and possible action regarding an MOU between Amador County and the Jackson Valley Fire Protection District to allow CAL FIRE to provide services within the JVFPD limits as part of the county's ISA with the Buena Vista Band of Miwok Indians.
Mr. May, why don't you sit right up front there, because we're not going to take public comment right at this moment. Thank you. Hey, who's going to talk about this?
So, Chair, Board, let me back up. The county has a contract with CAL FIRE, and we've triggered that contract, and CAL FIRE is starting to get prepared to provide that service. But there is no mechanism existing that allows CAL FIRE to operate within the Jackson Valley district, or to operate out of their station, or to use any of their apparatus. And so what I've prepared is a simple MOU, which is between the county and Jackson Valley Fire Protection District, which allows our contractor, which is CAL FIRE, to go into their station and their district and provide this service that's called for. And the county will get the funding from the tribe and ensure that it gets to CAL FIRE and anyone else who is obligated to perform those functions or get that funding in the ISA. So that's what this is. It did go before the Jackson Valley Fire Protection District at its meeting on April 18th, and they did approve it. And now it's before the board. CAL FIRE sort of staff has given their sort of initial approval for this. It is still pending sort of the higher up sort of blessing, but hopefully that happens. And so the board would need to weigh in on that.
we'll
Greg, so the board gets the full flavor of this. Can you give the main opponent was one board member? Can you give his position why he was so much opposed to this? Had to do mostly with the equipment, I think, didn't it? That even though the equipment's going to belong to Jackson Valley Fire Protection District, essentially CAL FIRE gets the right to operate that equipment.
You know, I was at the meeting, you were at the meeting. I'm not really sure what his issue was. He, you know, initially he was seemed upset that Jackson Valley wasn't a part of the ISA or at the table. And, you know, because this happened so long ago, I think people just don't recall. But Dennis Tremelling, who representative for Jackson Valley Fire Protection, was there. He ultimately, I think, cleared it up that Jackson Valley did have input into what went into the ISA. However, you know, that whole process was, you know, there were negotiations going on, and then ultimately it got condensed into an agreement, which, you know, may or may not have left out some of the details. And then it went to an arbitrator who ultimately adopted what is in the ISA agreement. And so that's what we have, for better or for worse. And so we're trying to implement it. And again, in the intervening 10 years, a lot of things have changed in how engines are staffed, costs. Jackson Valley Fire Protection District now has paid staff. That was an issue for them. Back when this was negotiated, there were no paid staff, so there wasn't really, you didn't have to deal with two paid staffs operating out of the same station. And so that's something that still has to get worked out. But I think what CAL FIRE and Jackson Valley talked about was sort of an operations manual where, you know, some of those issues get dealt with. But for the purpose of the MOU, I tried to keep it as simple as possible to get the ball rolling. Because if this isn't in place, CAL FIRE won't go in, can't go in, and then we're much further away from getting professional paid staff at levels needed to respond to all the casino traffic.
Good job writing an MOU in only like 3 pages. So
Like I said, I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Rob, just 1 second. I'm sorry.
Good morning, Rob Withrow with CAL FIRE. Did you have a couple questions? Is that?
Well,
Because Greg pretty much covered what our concerns were, and
Okay. So maybe you could just describe for me and for the audience what, assuming this MOU is approved, what your actual physical presence would be at the district office.
Sure. So at the current Jackson Valley Fire Station 171, we would be staffing a 3-person engine company, advanced life support engine company there, as well as a battalion chief and possibly some clerical support, either there or maybe at a different location. But for sure, a battalion chief and an engine company out of there.
Okay, and would you be working with the staff of, JB?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be our intent, would be have a collaborative effort down there, incorporate them into our operation as much as we can and vice versa, realizing though that those employees are employed by the Jackson Valley Fire District, not CAL FIRE.
Yes.
So, but yeah, we would work with them. And I think that's been some of our, we met with their volunteer and paid staff separately prior to the board meeting, excuse me, to start working through some of those issues, because obviously they have some concerns, and rightfully so. And one of the messages we tried to get across, and I think we were successful, is that, we're not here to exclude them. We're here to work together. And, we do that up and down the state and throughout the county already, so.
There were some Jackson Valley Fire Protection District volunteers who thought about or might want to come over and work for CAL FIRE, but you can't just say, okay, you work for CAL FIRE now. They have to go through the process.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's been one of the biggest confusing things, I think, for the district in terms of their staff. Because we're not contracting directly with Jackson Valley Fire District, we're going through the county. We would not be blanketing in those employees like we would if we were contracting directly with the district, if you will. And I think there was a lot of confusion with that. So, our best solution for that is we will help them to be as competitive as they can be. We'll provide them whatever support we can provide them, but no, we could not guarantee them employment with the state.
Now, I want to give you some kudos on that too, because I actually thought the meeting was at 6. I showed up at 6, and you were meeting with the employees.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you bet. It's like anything, a lot of this stuff, and I don't think it's a secret. This whole thing's a little clunky. We were all caught off guard. We certainly were as well. Our unit chief, right now as we speak, is meeting with our director at headquarters downtown to talk about this specific agreement. And this MOU is just one step in getting us on that road and bringing this all together. And I think the key here is going to be open communication and explaining stuff, dispelling rumors, those sorts of things. So,
Board questions? Okay, thank you, Rob, and I will open it up to public
Thank you.
comment now.
Come on, Bill. We're ready.
We're ready. Sorry to put you off.
Believe it or not, I have no problem at all with CAL FIRE. As a matter of fact, Rob and I spent a little time after the last meeting talking about Cool Hand Luke and enjoyed the conversation. My issue really is whether or not there's an ironclad guarantee, and this is directed toward Greg. The Jackson Valley Fire Protection District will be held harmless in the event something goes awry with the casino, it folds, etc. And that poor little small fire district be on the hook for any funds. They can't afford it. And Greg, I just want to get assurances from you that that's not the case, that in fact they would be held harmless.
Well, hold harmless is a legal term. It is very broad. That's not what I said at their meeting. The question was, is there any likelihood or possibility that Jackson Valley Fire Protection District could be responsible for paying CAL FIRE for their services? And my answer was no. I don't see any way that Jackson Valley could be obligated to pay for the services called for under the ISA because the county has a contract with CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE would have no basis to make a claim for payment from Jackson Valley Fire Protection District. We have the contract. So if the tribe stopped operating and CAL FIRE said, well, you still owe 10 months of service, that would be something the county has to deal with. And there's nothing in the MOU that makes Jackson Valley responsible to the county. That was the question. That was my answer to them.
Okay. I didn't quite understand it that way, but I wasn't at the meeting. So, again, very small district. I'm a taxpayer that pays into that, the Jackson Valley Fire Protection District. So are all my other friends and neighbors in Jackson Valley. So it's our bucks that are there too. We're paying for this.
You're paying for what?
We're paying for the services of the Jackson Valley Fire Protection District as taxpayers. So, okay, well, that may be the only response I'm going to get. Like I say, I wasn't there, but that's not quite what I understood you to respond to, but it is what it is.
If you want to tell me what other obligations that Jackson Valley will be responsible for, we can have that discussion. That's the question I got at the meeting, and you're saying blanket hold harmless. Well, that probably isn't true. If Jackson Valley staff crashes into a CAL FIRE truck, they're going to be responsible. There's no way that the county is going to hold them harmless for that, just like any other accident they get in.
Yeah.
So I don't know what question you're asking. You're asking a very broad question that just would not be broadly applicable. If you
Well,
want to
Greg,
ask specifics, I can try to answer.
Bill
them.
doesn't want taxpayers and Jackson Valley Fire to get stuck with anything, so maybe it'll help. We're trying to work something out that the tribe will put money into a pot so that there's a wind-down period for CAL FIRE of over a year. If anything happens where CAL FIRE says we can no longer provide service here, or the casino is not making payments, at least there'll be money in an account for a wind-down period.
Yes, we've
Right.
done that.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to comment on this MOU?
I think that concern is valid too, because it has happened in Southern California where the economy has got bad and people aren't gambling as much and the tribes are not making revenue and they stop making payments. So I think we need to be aware of that and make provisions like money in separate accounts to take care of those situations where payments stop.
Something that needs to be added to the MOU, or is that something that can be done separately?
I think it's part of the ISA, isn't it? I don't know. I'm asking.
So the MOU just allows
Oh, okay.
CAL FIRE access, and what the county agrees to do is to basically pass through all the money that we get from tribe.
Okay, so we can ratify the MOU
to the
then
end. Yeah, you can.
without any, okay.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the MOU between Amador County and Jackson Valley Fire Protection District to allow CAL FIRE to provide services within the JV FPD limits as part of the county's ISA with Buena Vista Band of Miwok Indians.
Second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the MOU between Amador County and the Jackson Valley Fire Protection District to allow CAL FIRE to provide services, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
On that item, I want to thank CAL FIRE for working on that and our staff, but also Jackson Valley Fire Protection District. I think their board chair, Jake Herfel, did a great job in trying to keep the stars all aligned so that his board approved that MOU also.
Very good. Okay, let's move on to item 6D.
Brian.
Oh, that's right, we need Brian back. Let me just explain the reason that this is on the agenda. I think possibly all of the board members, including myself, have been receiving emails from people asking if we plan on joining I think there's this lawsuit filed by a number of counties. Is that right, Greg? Or there's
No,
not yet?
not yet.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, regarding opposing the sanctuary state status, first, I want to reiterate that this is a political issue. This is not a real issue. It's politics only, but it's important enough because we've heard about it that it's on the agenda.
Well, and we did address this last year.
Right.
And it's in our packet, and we did take a position. Our board, what is it? Senate Bill 54.
Yes.
Our board voted 5-0 to oppose.
To oppose it.
Senate Bill
Yep.
54.
Well, I'd like to add that my opposition was with respect to the list of crimes that were I guess, allowed or not allowed. And that was really my position. And that maybe it wasn't extensive enough and that it didn't include enough serious crimes. I don't know if that's changed in the new legislation or not. I looked through the bill. It looks like it's pretty extensive, but I'm not sure they've caught everything. But that was my position on
But
it.
the board voted unanimously, Frank.
Well, yeah, but I just wanted
Oh,
to,
that you
I
had
just wanted to
opposition.
say that
Okay.
was my reason.
That's
It had
fine.
nothing to do with all the other aspects of it.
That's fine. So are any members of the public here to speak about this?
We have our sheriff and our
Actually,
DA.
yes, I'm sorry. Let me ask Sheriff Ryan to, since,
Oh, he's DA too.
and our district attorney.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak on this topic. It's obviously one that is a hot-button topic throughout the state, and particularly amongst the California state sheriffs who deal with the undocumenteds in our jails, and how we are able to or not able to cooperate and communicate with ICE with regards to criminal undocumenteds that we house. What I'd like to do this morning is to just briefly go over the history of the immigration laws that have taken effect over the last couple of years, and then I have a statement I'd like to read that shouldn't take much time. So if you'll indulge me with that. The first thing that came down the pike was the California Trust Act that became effective January 1st of 2014, and that prohibited law enforcement from detaining a person for up to 48 hours on the basis of an ICE hold after they became eligible for release from custody under state law. Our policy in the Amador County Sheriff's Office and that of all California sheriffs is exactly that. There's been a federal appeals court decision and a California Attorney General opinion, it wasn't an opinion, an information bulletin, that basically stated that ICE detainers are mere requests and that are not court orders that would allow us to hold persons beyond their regular scheduled release on state charges. To do so would expose the sheriffs and the counties to civil rights violations under the Fourth Amendment. So we have not done that. So this legislation basically states what we already do as a result of the decisions and things like that.
You're not saying that's political then?
What's that?
You're not saying that was a political maneuver?
No, of course not. But I also want to state that during my time as president of the California State Sheriff's Association from 15-16, my associate and myself personally had conversations with then ICE Director Saldana with regards to this issue. We had a lot of blowback from Washington, particularly with ICE, with regards to why California, those crazy people out in California weren't cooperating with ICE detainers. We had many discussions with them with regards to the legal limitations that prohibited us from doing so. And we finally came around to that decision that that's the way it was and that we're legally prohibited, so they've kind of gotten off our back with regards to pressuring us to comply with detainers that we are quite certain would end us up in federal civil rights actions. So,
Martin, can you clarify something about that that portion of SB 54 and federal law. But it says in two places under SB 54 that, let's see, you can't disclose information about an individual, including but not limited to the individual's home address or work address. Then it says, unless that information is available to the public. So why couldn't you just make that information available to the public and then it's available to ICE?
Well, what happens, and let me explain the process as we go forward, and it may clarify some of that. And if I don't get to that point,
Okay.
please remind me. Okay, thank you. So the second thing that came up was the California Truth Act, and that took effect in January 1st of 2018. And that basically stated that law enforcement must provide undocumented inmates with a written consent form that explains the purpose of the ICE interview, that is voluntary on their part, and the inmate can decline the interview. It requires law enforcement to provide copies to the inmate of certain ICE documents received by law enforcement, and law enforcement's intent to comply with those ICE requests. All records related to the ICE access to inmates is a public record of the California Public Records Act, and we also comply with all the requirements of the Truth Act. It is in our policy to do so.
Why would a detained prisoner want to comply with an interview with the ICE people if they might be here illegally?
Well, it's if I understand the question correctly.
Why would they agree to that?
Well, exactly. And so that's another roadblock for
they
us.
Normally don't.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, and we'll talk about our statistics because we don't have that much interaction with ICE, but I can tell you up and down the state that they're not getting compliance, since it'd be like any other criminal defendant that we deal with, and we ask them to talk to us, and believe it or not, sometimes they don't want to. So it's the same kind of situation here. And then SB 54, which became the California Values Act, it came into play in January 1st of 18. It actually repeals an existing law that if law enforcement had a reason to believe a person was arrested for certain controlled substance laws and they may not be a citizen of the United States, the arresting agency shall notify ICE of the event. That is no longer allowed. It prohibits state and local law enforcement from using money or personnel to investigate, interrogate, detain, detect, or arrest persons for immigration enforcement purposes. And just as an overall caveat, local law enforcement, state law enforcement cannot enforce federal laws. So this is kind of the Department of Redundancy department with this law with regards to things that we couldn't do anyway. It requires that any law enforcement agency that participates in a joint law enforcement task force submit an annual report to the California DOJ. And that has to do with whether or not we have interactions with undocumented aliens with regards to the works of the task force. I think it's also to make sure that we're not enforcing the civil immigration laws, which we're prohibited from law from doing anyway. It requires an annual law enforcement reports to California DOJ regarding transfer of persons to immigration authorities. And it provides that there will be no law enforcement cooperation with immigration for individuals arrested, detained, or convicted of misdemeanors that were previous felonies or wobblers prior to Prop 47. And you may recall that Prop 47, one of the things it did was it made it used to be a felony for certain crimes with regards to theft. But anything now under $950, whether it be a firearm, whether it be a car, those are now misdemeanors. So we could not communicate with ICE over people that are convicted, arrested, or detained under any one of those crimes. So that's one of the flaws in that law in itself.
Question on that. So if you had multiple misdemeanors, you still couldn't cooperate with ICE?
Correct. And that's the problem with the California law with 47, is that you could continue to reoffend with any of those types of thefts under 950 and will never earn your way to state prison, because it's always going to be a misdemeanor, and they're going to recycle back into our county jails.
So in the actual legislation for SB 54, where it says theft and vandalism, that has to be felony theft then?
Correct.
But how often does somebody always just commit misdemeanor theft? Just out of
It's the things that we're seeing now with the thefts from retailers in particular, everything's under $950.
So this is like shoplifting?
Well, it's shoplifting, but it's major appliances. I mean, there's a lot of things that big screen TVs. We had one a couple of years ago out of Walmart. We pulled up, the guy's walking off with a big screen TV, and we stopped him. He says, "I'm not in any trouble, am I?" It's under $950.
Yeah.
So they kind of know what the limit is.
We knew that, huh?
You know, and those of us that have firearms, I don't own too many that are over $950. Most people's firearms are significantly under that, so that leaves that ripe for theft too, which is a big problem.
Really what it does, it kind of ties your hands. If you see somebody that's really a bad actor in the community, you're kind of, your hands are tied as far as telling ICE, hey, we got this person here and
Absolutely.
causing a lot of mayhem. And $950 and not a felony, it's okay.
Right.
Basically.
And the problem is you can't go backwards. I'm sure Todd's going to speak on this too, but if it's a misdemeanor, you can't go backwards and look at their record if they have felonies on their record.
Correct. It has to deal with that particular violation at that time. Now, the California Values Act, or Senate Bill 54. Under Senate Bill 54, sheriffs are precluded from relaying information about persons convicted of serious crimes, such as domestic violence, repeat drunk driving, unless the offender also had prior convictions for serious or violent felonies defined very narrowly in 2 state statutes, and council knows what those statutes are. There's a very limited number that they're considering serious felonies for state law, which also applies to this. And if there's no arrest and no conviction, law enforcement can't communicate with ICE either.
So this list of all these serious felonies in the bill, not sufficient?
It's correct. It doesn't include such things as sexual battery, human trafficking, assault on a peace officer, solicitation for murder, drive-by shootings, and a host of other
So that wouldn't fall under like
crimes.
sexual abuse or sexual exploitation?
It's a general one, but it doesn't specify that particular offense, and so we don't believe that that applies.
Question, so if there's been no arrest, no conviction, what about if you know or suspicion that person is in your community, bad person, and you notify ICE that they're in that area?
Not under SB 54, to my understanding. So such laws like this result in dangerous criminals, including gang members and drug dealers. We've seen that up and down the state, being released in the communities without notification to the federal authorities who can actually prevent that from happening.
So under gang-related offenses, that doesn't?
Being a gang member is where we're not allowed to communicate with ICE on that individual. Now, we do provide them information. I can explain that as well as to how they do get information from us. But the threat of the violence that results from releasing criminal, undocumented aliens back into our community includes the immigrant community. And not so much in Amador County because we don't see a lot of that. But these folks tend to prey on the very immigrant communities that they live in. And so they get out and they go right back to those communities. If you look at what's happening with MS-13, that violent gang out of South America, they go back in their community. That's who they prey on, is other gang members, other members of the community. They don't go out into other areas and cause harm to others. So it's kind of confusing to me why people would want to let these people back out into the immigrant communities so they can prey on them again. Right.
Kind of interesting about that. I talked to some local Hispanics in my area, and that's what they told me. Basically, the bad guys, they want them gone because they come out and cause trouble for them.
And I think there's a lot of good folks in the immigrant community that feel exactly that way.
That's how
That
they feel.
we don't want criminals in our community just like anybody else doesn't want them in theirs. So I need to clarify and state clearly that my office does not enforce federal immigration laws that we're legally prohibited from enforcing anyway. We don't ask persons we stop or arrest about their immigration status.
And you're not allowed to enforce federal immigration laws because of SB 54 or the earlier
No, that was
legislation?
pre-existing prior to SB 54. We don't have the legal authority to enforce
In
the federal
general,
law.
they can't enforce federal laws.
Right. We don't have the authority to do so. My office does not seek out persons who are in this country illegally in violation of federal law. They seek us out. They seek us out because they're arrested. They seek us out because they're brought into my jail and because they're booked. These are the persons that we as local law enforcement in our communities want out of our communities. We don't want them back in the community where they can cause more harm. When a subject's booked into our jail, a question is asked of everyone on the booking form if they were born outside of the United States, not whether or not they're here legally or illegally. But we ask the question because we're required by law to notify some consulates if members of their country or their citizens are arrested. And so we have to fulfill that obligation. All we need is to know where they were born. And so once we have that, we don't ask the question if you're here legally, illegally, or not. So that information is not provided to ICE. The only contact that ICE gets from us, again, it goes back to the fact that these folks come to our attention, we don't go seek them, is that when they're booked, they're fingerprinted using a live scan system that feeds the California Department of Justice criminal database. That database also feeds the national database, the federal database, and that's what ICE and the other federal law enforcement partners, they mine that data for people they're looking for. Once they get that information, then they can contact us and make arrangements to attempt to interview or to come over and pick that individual up while they're still in our custody on the state charges. So we do have that communication, and that's how the information gets to ICE. We don't actively go out and notify. It's through the booking system that it comes to their attention as well. Our sheriff's office has not had any ICE holds placed on any inmates since 2014. Therefore, nobody's been picked up. Nobody's been turned over to ICE since that time. And in 2014, I was looking at the statistics. We had 22 undocumented aliens in our custody. ICE put holds on 7 of them. So it wasn't a big number at that time, but since the changes and things that have gone through, again, they don't contact us, we don't contact them. Part of the problem is how far away we are from ICE and how long it takes them to get here.
So why did ICE only put holds or requests on 7 of the 22? Is that because those 7 are the only ones that turned up in their database, or?
No, it has to do with their particular criminal history. The fact that they're undocumented may pop up, but it may not be something that they want to put them into custody for. So they have a set number of criteria that they use, number of illegal entries in the United States, criminal violations that have been committed in the past, things of that nature. So they have a priority list as well with who they want, and so it's not every undocumented that comes into our system, our jail, that they're notified of that they're interested in deporting. In 2016, with an average jail population of 90, 3.24% of our inmates were undocumented, and 4.12% were undocumented felons, as reported to us by the federal government. That information comes back to us again from the booking. There is a federal program that provides us with some reimbursement for housing undocumenteds in our jail, and we get paid for that every year. So figure undocumented felons at 4% of 90, roughly 4.5, 5 of those individuals, undocumented felons in our facility, that if we don't have the ability to get out of there and into ICE custody, would be back in our communities. Whether they're from here or passing through, they'd still be released out into the community. So that's a concern that we have from a law enforcement perspective.
Are they nice felons?
You know, I didn't have an opportunity to speak with them because you have to give them the form first, and they wouldn't do that. No, just kidding.
No, I mean, I don't like hearing that, to be quite honest, what they're releasing back out.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault, I understand that.
True. As previously stated, my office complies with the Truth and Trust Acts and will comply with this law as well. We protect those in our communities regardless of their immigration status. However, we should not protect or recycle criminals. Limiting our ability to communicate with our immigration authorities and therefore having criminals released back into our neighborhoods creates a safety hazard for law enforcement officers. It also creates the same for ICE agents who have up till now been able to safely take undocumented criminal aliens into custody in the safety and security of a jail. Now what are they doing? You can see this on the news all the time. They're going into immigrant communities in order to find those individuals they want. So instead of 1 or 2 ICE agents that can come into a jail and take custody, they're sending teams into the community to look for dangerous people. It could result in harm to those people. And quite honestly, if they go into a house where there's a criminal alien that they want, and there's other undocumenteds there, those folks are going too until they have a hearing to determine whether or not they should stay. So other people not related to that criminal are being swept up because they happen to be cohabitating or have some relationship with that individual. So it creates a danger for that community as well.
Do you
So-
know, Sheriff, in in our state, roughly how much of that kind of team ice activity is actually happening?
There have been a number of fairly large sweeps over the last year or so with the change in focus from the federal government perspective,
Right.
Primarily in Southern California, but I know they've done sweeps in Fresno, they've done them in the Bay Area. Those major population areas that have a high immigrant population, and a lot of those folks that they have information on that they want to take back into custody.
To me, Martin, that's one of the biggest negatives of this whole thing is you're putting our law enforcement at greater risk because of these laws that are being passed, disregarding, it's a blatant disregard of their safety.
Sure, I agree 100%, Supervisor Forster, and again, it also endangers the local immigrant communities or wherever these folks are staying. I mean, you've got armed officers trying to take somebody into felony custody, either through a search warrant or however their actions are, and if there's gunfire going on, there could be innocents injured in that process. So it is a horribly bad plan, in my opinion, to allow that to happen. Supervisor Renato, you had a question?
Pretty well answered it. What I was just thinking about, if you somebody in jail, it's probably a pretty clean transfer. Go out and chase him around a community, like you said, that person's probably not want to go back or be caught for their crimes, and putting your officers at risk, because rather than going to jail saying, hey, come with us, you're chasing somebody around a strange location, a lot of times dark or whatever it may be, and it could get hurt, whether it's an officer, whether it's a person you're trying to catch, or the local community if bad things happen, or if you have even maybe a person takes off in a car, it's a threat. It's not a good situation.
Agreed. And members of the board, as I'm sworn to do, I'm going to uphold the laws of this state. However, it's my opinion that this law creates very real yet unnecessary risks of harm for the citizens of our county, the citizens of the state of California, the immigrant communities, and our law enforcement personnel, as Supervisor Forster has stated. Criminals should fear the consequences of their actions, and that includes deportation from the United States if they're here illegally and they commit crimes in this state. Any other questions from the board?
I don't think you ever got to that one point that I brought up early, that SB 54, it prohibits you from giving immigration authorities personal information or release dates, and it says unless that information is available to the public. So are you prohibited from making that information available to the public?
No, we have a program called Vine. It's a notification system that people can sign up for. It's a public database that tells people who's in custody. I know some of my counterparts in the state, and I have to look into this with our system, have started posting proposed release dates on anyone that's in custody, not just undocumented. You have to do it for everyone in your prison, your jail population. So I have to see if our system allows us to do that. I'm certainly willing to do that. The problem with that system, quite honestly, for us is our distance away from things, how far we are removed from that. The other variable in that is what happens in court. You may send them over for court for a particular hearing, and for some reason the court decides to turn them loose right then. Prior to their scheduled release date, there's no way to adjust for that. So we can try. It gets the information out there. How accurate it would be in the long run, I'm not exactly sure.
It's kind of a loophole, but it's a hard loophole to get around.
Correct.
Eventually they'll close that loophole, I would imagine.
I would assume so.
Oh, I had one more question. I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say 4% of felons in our jail are documented?
4% of the jail population in 2016 were undocumented felons.
Other board questions? That was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff.
B.
Put this down to my level. Good morning.
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 What I'm going to do is a little bit different than, you've got a really good rendition from County Council on SB 54, so I'm not really going to get that much into the law on that aspect of it. And you've heard what the impact has been upon the sheriff and what their responsibilities are under SB 54 and some of the issues that they're facing. What I want to do is sort of give you the legal framework and some of the issues that are coming out between this battle between the feds and the state and local government, and also going to delve into how 54 impacts public safety. First of all, a little bit of a legal background. U.S. Constitution gives Congress the general power to legislate in Article 1, and it specifically mentions that this power includes creating laws on naturalization, which is in Section 8, Clause 4. This gives Congress the power to define immigration categories and provide procedures on entry and deportation. The 10th Amendment says that the federal government cannot commandeer state governments. Basically, you can't boss the state governments around. Basically, what that means is that the federal government can create laws in certain categories, but it cannot force states to enforce them. That means that states don't have to use state or local resources, which means money and people, that are working in state and local governments to enforce federal policies. However, the state and local governments cannot actively subvert federal immigration and enforcement efforts, as that would violate the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, which basically means that when federal and state law collide, that federal law trumps state law. Federal authorities state that California sanctuary state laws violate 8 U.S. Code Section 1373, which states that a federal, state, or local governmental entity or official may not prohibit or in any way restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from the Immigration and Naturalization Service information regarding the citizenship or immigration status, lawful or unlawful, of any individual. That is the section that the lawsuit that was filed by the federal government, A.G. Sessions, on California. That was the code section at the heart of it. California authorities respond that the 10th Amendment prevents the federal government from ordering California to collect immigration status information in order to share it with the federal government. California authorities believe that because the data is never collected due to don't ask, don't tell policies, California is not in violation of federal law. Federal authorities, as you probably heard, have sought to punish the states and local governments that have sanctuary laws that they believe violate USC Section 1373 by withholding federal grant funding pursuant to the spending clause of Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. One such grant program is the BURN JAG program, Justice Assistant Grant Program. We receive that money as well, which is the primary provider. The BURN JAG program is the primary provider of federal criminal justice funding to state and local governments. Chicago, which has a sanctuary city policy, the federal government suspended their BURN JAG grant. They sued, and the trial court issued a nationwide injunction preventing Attorney General Jeff Sessions from imposing that policy. Last week, a federal appellate court upheld the injunction, holding that because Congress, which issued the BURN JAG grant, did not impose any immigration enforcement conditions on the receipt of such funds, the DOJ policy was an unconstitutional violation of the spending clause. I'm not going to spend too much time on SB 54. I think I had a pretty good grasp on it, but basically it prohibits state and local law enforcement agencies from using money or personnel to investigate, interrogate, detain, detect, or arrest persons for immigration enforcement purposes, and it limits the activities or conduct by law enforcement with immigration enforcement. We know in defiance of SB 54, San Diego and Orange counties, representing the second and third most populated counties in the state, have passed resolutions pledging to cooperate with federal authorities. Law enforcement in these counties compile a list of all the names of the county jail inmates to be released and make that list available to the public. Because all the names are listed and not the immigration statuses, these counties do not believe that they're violating SB 54. It's information that they are sharing with the public, and everybody, it's just names. ICE can then cross-reference that list with databases that they have to determine which inmates are known to be there illegally and detain them upon release. As of yet, there has not been a formal response from the state of California as to what, if any, action they will take against these counties, and I've heard that the city of Paso Robles may be joining as well. Interestingly, if California seeks to withhold state grant funding from local governments that refuse to follow SB 54, they may face the same fate as Attorney General Jeff Sessions, in that the legislature did not impose any conditions mandating compliance with SB 54 as a condition to receive such funds. Future grant funds, however, could be conditioned on the recipient following SB 54. So how does SB 54 impact public safety? Well, illegal immigrants that are released from county jails back into the community that obey the law and don't recidivate, they're not the problem. The problem, and that's for somebody, the issue of immigration, I'm focusing on the impact of public safety. It's above my pay grade to talk about the issue of immigration overall. That will be fought in another venue. The problem are those that are once released, break the law again, and create new victims that never had to have been victimized in the first place. It is this recidivist population within the illegal immigrant population who pose an unacceptable public safety risk, which is created by SB 54. Nationwide, of 8,145 undocumented immigrants released from detention between January 1st of 2014 and August 31st of 2014, 5,132, representing 63%, had prior criminal convictions or were marked a public safety concern. 2,984, 36.6%, had felony charges or convictions. 1,909, 23.4%, had misdemeanor convictions or charges related to violence, assault, sexual abuse, weapons, or drug distribution. 239, or 2.9%, had 3 or more misdemeanor convictions. A recent Department of Homeland Security report states that between October 1st of 2016 and June 19th of 2017, an 8-month period, at least 140 suspected gang members were here illegally were released due to a lack of cooperation between ICE and local immigration authorities. Of that number, 89 of the 140, representing 63.6%, were from California. Neri Israel Estrada Margos, age 38, bailed out from Sonoma County Jail on August 3rd of 2017 after being booked on domestic battery charges. He turned himself in to Santa Rosa police 2 weeks later, saying he killed his girlfriend, the victim of the previous misdemeanor that he bailed out on. His girlfriend, Veronica Cabrera Ramirez, 42, after domestic dispute. ICE had asked the jail officials to hold Estrada Margos on the misdemeanor for up to 48 hours on an immigration detainer so it could take him into custody as he had returned to the country illegally after a 2008 deportation to Guatemala, but the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office refused. We've heard about the Fourth Amendment concerns on that. Jesus Perez Araujo, 24, was arrested in May of 2017 and charged for possession of brass knuckles. While he was in custody, ICE requested that he be placed on an immigration detainer, but the San Francisco Sheriff's Office refused. 3 months later, Perez Araujo and 2 other men were arrested on suspicion of murder of Abel Esquivel. The series of events that led to Esquivel's death began on August 12th of 2017 when Perez Araujo and another man stole a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver and ammunition from the car of an off-duty San Francisco police officer. Perez Araujo and 2 other men then went on a robbery spree, which ended in the early morning hours of August 15th of this last year, ending with Perez Araujo shooting Esquivel, killing him. These are just a few examples. They're the most egregious examples, but there are many others. The California Constitution states that the protection of public safety is the first priority of local government, Article 13, Section 35, Subdivision A2. Because we know that a sizable population of illegal immigrants released from the jail will commit new crimes, SB 54 unreasonably and unnecessarily jeopardizes public safety by unduly restricting law enforcement's ability to communicate and cooperate with federal immigration officials. SB 54, in a nutshell, chooses to give more weight to the immigration concerns over those persons who are released from detention than it does to the inevitable new victims that this policy has and will continue to create. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to get a copy of what you spoke from there in your letter.
Sure. I have it in, I'll give it to you right now if that's okay.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Other board questions?
Thank you.
Todd, what's your experience here in Amador County?
What's that?
What's your experience here in Amador County with respect to, seeing recidivism from undocumented folks in the area?
We very seldom, and I can't even recall in 20 years I've been district attorney, ever being contacted by ICE. It's mainly a front-line law enforcement issue. However, we do...
Never prosecuted anybody or had to? Or?
No. But what we do in every case that where a defendant enters a plea of guilty, they are advised by the court that their plea may have immigration consequences. That's a part of the plea form. Defense counsel really has to pay attention, because if they don't advise their clients of the possible immigration consequences, they could be found to have committed ineffective assistance of counsel. So it's a big issue. Whenever my staff has somebody that we suspect may have immigration consequences, we want to make sure that that's listed, that's mentioned very clearly on the record, so they can go into this with their eyes wide open. We don't want to lose a conviction down the line because that wasn't done, and that has happened in some communities.
I think that the concern on an issue like this is much broader than just Amador County. I mean, all of us have family all over the state of California and all over the United States, but I have family that live in urbanized areas too, and I'm concerned that this law opens up the ability for criminals to get out of jail and where they could have been held, endangering the lives of citizens, endangering the lives of law enforcement, federal and state. So I'm a big believer that SB 54 was not the right way to go, and many of the rule changes they're making at the state level are wrong on diminishing or taking the offenses and making them basically go away, so you can't look backwards at what an individual did.
I agree. I agree with your comments wholeheartedly. There's no way with a straight face you can say that SB 54 does not create a public safety risk. It does. It's a public safety risk to law enforcement. It's a public safety risk to federal immigration officials. It's a public safety risk to the people in the communities who these people who are released, who are here illegally, go back to those communities, and a sizable portion will recidivate. And that's indisputable, and that's going to continue until, we'll find out with the sessions, with the U.S. lawsuit.
But the good news for Amador County is that this is not a big issue for us.
I don't think we're in my own personal opinion, you have the second and third most populated counties in the state of California that are taking this issue on head now, right now. They have the resources,
right,
both private and public, to be able to fight this battle. I don't see why we need to be in the forefront of it. We don't know how the state is going to respond to San Diego and Orange and any city that opposes SB 54. Undoubtedly, if there is any litigation, that's going to be a cost to that jurisdiction. I'm not sure that The economy seems to be doing okay right now, but that's a cost that we don't have to absorb. Let them run interference. We've done it enough for them.
Well, on 54, we took a position on that, but as far as San Diego, one supervisor was absent, traveling, but the vote was 3-1. The one was Greg Cox, who's by no means a left-wing radical.
Yeah.
Very stable. He's the first vice president of the National Association of Counties, but I talked to him last week about it. His rationale was this is a federal issue. Let the federal government deal with it with the state of California. The other three supervisors, one of them has nothing to lose. He's going to be termed out, but another one is running for Congress, so it was more of a campaign issue.
Right.
You know, one thing I think I differ with Chairperson Morgan is I think it is an issue for Amador County. Yes, is there more illegals in other areas? Sure. But do illegals travel? Yes. Do we travel? Yes. I think also it's just, I think it's something we should state for the record where we are. We don't have to get involved in the lawsuit because I think that could be financially hit this county.
Right.
But I heard what our sheriff said. I heard what our DA said. I heard what other law enforcement told me individually. I don't think there's anything wrong with us saying, hey, this is where we're at. We don't like what's happening and why.
Oh, neither do I. I wasn't trying to say that you shouldn't take a position on it. Just not the way, in the manner that San Diego and Orange have. I mean, they're going to fight that battle, and we'll see what the results are. But
sure with what you said, but I think also, I think the sheriff said 4% of our jail population is undocumented felons that are let out. 4% of our jail population being let out that are felons. To me, I think that affects Amador County. I'm sorry.
That was in 2016. That was one point in time.
anyway, any other questions?
No, but I want to thank you and
Yes.
Sheriff Ryan
Thank
for
you, both
the
of you.
thorough analysis and summary of all the issues.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Sherry Curtis, and I'm coming here on behalf of some other citizens who are having surgery right now, and those who have asked me to ask you to write a resolution against the sanctuary state, not to have to join a lawsuit. We are a small county, we can't afford that. But to say this is only a political issue is sad. It's a serious public safety issue. And I know it's happened before that anytime there's something someone disagrees with, it becomes a political issue. So we would like to have you put a resolution, which shouldn't cost that much money, that stands against a sanctuary state, and that we do want, since it's the first issue in our state constitution, which you've all sworn to uphold, to provide public safety for your residents. And we would appreciate that very, very much. Thank you.
Barry, can I ask you a question? This board has already taken a position against SB 54. What is the necessity to write a letter then? Our position's pretty clear.
Well, if it would come out in the paper that there's a resolution that you support other counties who are heavily impacted, that we would join, we could be like a joint powers group to support the other counties that are heavily impacted. That's just, I know we did support going against 54, but now there is more concern because they've seen more evidence. We may not be as impacted, but we still are. So I'd appreciate that consideration. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
No,
This was discussion only, so
I would like to see this brought back at our next meeting. Not really an actions request. Look at doing a resolution and have action.
I don't want to do that. I think we've already taken a position. What I'd like to do is, in our staff report, it's too late to file an amicus brief now, because I think April 6th was the date where that lapsed. But I would like to have our county council just keep tabs on this and possibly give us an opportunity when, if this issue goes to appeal, for this to be brought back and for our board to consider filing an amicus brief in support of the Attorney General of the United States.
Yeah, I can do that if that's the direction of the board. I did in reviewing. I don't know if it's in the staff report. I did see that San Diego's board chair had made the comment out, because all the counties that you've read, that's counties have signed on or given direction to get involved in this litigation. That's all just been reported out of closed session, so there's not a lot of detail about what or when. But San Diego's board chair did say that her expectation was that it would be on appeal, that they would file their amicus. It's likely that this will get appealed regardless of the decision.
Well, I agree with Supervisor Forrester that, I'd appreciate if you'd keep us apprised of this. And I suppose we can put it on our next agenda just for an update.
I'd like to see it on the next agenda for possible action. That's my request.
Madam Chair, could we put it on the agenda just to reiterate our opposition to 54, just so that everyone's up to date, and we're going to follow along to try to file America's brief as it moves through the court system? I'm against having a resolution, but
I think we could take your action today if we wanted to.
No action today.
No action today.
that's what I thought.
Right. Okay, well, we will consider this at our next meeting, which is May 8th. Okay.
When you say consider, is that going to have possible action?
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're going to take a break, and then we'll go to item 6E, the Shuki Museum roof in Fiddletown. 10 minutes. 11:10.
Trying to hit a movie.
Yes, they do, yes. Okay, let's call the meeting back to order, please. And we will go to item 6E, General Services Administration, Shuki Museum Roof in Fiddletown.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. John Hopkins, General Services Director. So I placed this on the agenda for discussion and possible action today. This is a new identified project, which is, the topic is replacing the roof that's out there in the Shuki store. I have looked at the roof. It does need to be replaced. So some of the questions I had for you is to identify where funding would come from for this particular project if you wanted to establish this as a project.
John, can you back up just a second, give a quick overview on what the Shuki store is and how it came to be a county?
Actually, yes, and because we have folks here from the Fiddletown Preservation Society, I'm going to defer to either Elaine or Beth or Alice to come up and give that brief history to the board if, since that's been suggested, because they've got a better handle on that than I do.
That'd be great.
Yes, sir. I can't hear you. Yeah, I can't hear you at all.
That's my fault, sorry.
Oh, yeah, you got to.
My fault. No, I just wanted to test to
That
see.
little red button, Brian.
Hear us okay now?
Good, thank you.
Elaine? Elaine Zorbas.
I need you to go to the mic, please, I'm sorry.
If we need to speak into the mic, you do too.
That's it.
All right, here we go. Some of you have not had the pleasure of visiting the Shuki store. I know Supervisor Oneto, of course, has. But it is a museum open to the public on Saturdays. And this is a picture of the external part, and you can see the roof. And then I also want to show you a picture of the interior part and then tell you a little bit about the store.
Not only did I have the pleasure of visiting, I removed a tree that was a hazard tree by your store. So, quite familiar with it.
So I speak to you as a historian and also as an author of a book published in 2015 about the Chinese in Fiddletown and Amador County. And part of the center of that book is the Shuki store because it's really, really important to California history. The Chinese helped build our state. They also helped build our county. And there are very few traces left of their presence in California. And Fiddletown stands out because we have 3 buildings from probably built in 1855, 1860, that were either occupied by the Chinese or built by them. And all 3 of those buildings are owned by the county. And we had a, let's see, in 2001 to 2008, we received 2 grants from California, over $500,000 to restore the exterior of 2 of those buildings that had been neglected for years, and that was the Chinese gambling house and the Chinese general store. But the Shuki store stands out throughout the state. There's nothing like it because it's not only a building, it's a building with objects, thousands of objects within it. And those objects reflected the life of Chinese immigrants from 1884, starting with the herb doctor who first occupied the store and administered to the health needs of the community, to the next tenant, Shuki, and his wife, who he was both a grocer and a gambler. The store had lots of gambling paraphernalia. And finally, Jimmy Chow, who lived in the store and was the last Chinese person to live in Fiddletown. And he was a pack rat. So luckily, these layers of occupation of Chinese immigrants, of Chinese culture, are all in the store. And the store is a tourist attraction. It's visited by researchers, filmmakers, historians, Chinese, people from China, students from our area and around, and just general tourists all over. We get more than 600 visitors a year, and it would be a real tragedy if the store is not preserved. And as you know, the roof is the first front against any kind of intrusion into the artifacts in the store. It's been 30 years since a shake roof was installed. I don't know, John, you probably want to go on. I will just add one thing, that it's very important for future grants, et cetera, to consider the historical accuracy in replacing the roof. The shakes that were built in a 1988 restoration were 36 inches long to match the original roof. And whereas I understand fire danger from wooden shakes, the roof has to look like it used to. So I would recommend that a historical architect be retained to guide the process and set the standards for replacement of the roof. Thank you.
Question for
sure.
you, Ms. Orbis. Do you think you have to have an architectural engineer look at that, or historical architect? That's going to be some expense, and really, I think it's something I think the society could do, or the county could do, without having to go and hire somebody to make a choice of a type of roof like that. I mean, I would personally lean towards a shake roof. I know it is more money.
John is going to address that.
Okay.
Yes, Supervisor, I believe that's true. We have the ability, it's a wood shake roof. The shakes are unique, but you can still get them fire treated. It is acceptable. I made a mention of that in my memo about, I vetted that out with Steve Stokes, our chief building official. And because that building, along with other buildings, is in a historic site, it qualifies as a historic structure, and you're allowed to put these fire treated wood shakes back on the building. You do have several quotes in there for other options. When the Preservation Society first contacted me, I'm actually the one that geared them toward looking at wood shakes because they were going down a different path. And I know just from my experience, we try to keep things as in their historic significance and the aesthetics as close as possible. And there is the option to have the building re-roofed with chemically treated, fire-treated wood shakes.
You know, I think it'd be more money, but I think it gives that building a real different look. One thing I think I would be looking at very closely is what type of, if the board chooses wood, is what type of wood they choose, because quite realistically, I've seen shake roofs that are 100 years old and they're not rotten.
Right.
So I think it depends if you get heart cedar, heart sugar pine, or if you get some of those that have sapwood.
Right.
Make a big difference.
Right. But I think staff, and I talked with Ms. Squire today, this morning too, and it's our intention that if the board wants to establish this as a project, and I have one idea for funding potentially, then staff would work with the Preservation Society to develop those specifications before we let it out to bid, to make sure that the community is on board and that facilities with our expertise is guiding them appropriately to what needs to happen with that particular structure. So the questions for the board, and I apologize for not giving a little bit of history, because as I think about it here, there's 3 of you here that are new that probably have never even been introduced to the Preservation Society, but we've had a long-term relationship the county has over the years, and we actually have a management agreement with them to occupy that building, do general maintenance, and keep the building open. I think that was also a condition of the grant at the time, potentially. But now there's a repair that needs to be made, and hence the reason I'm talking to you guys this morning about that. The only identified funding I can think of is that, and while we haven't discussed budget, we haven't gone through budget hearings yet, Usually every year there's funding that's provided to the board in our capital improvement line for unforeseen projects. It's our minor line in our capital improvement. I've requested another $150,000 from the board this year. If that is the only idea I've had for funding, and if you wanted to target this as a project, somewhere in the range of $20,000 to $30,000 for the first project for those unforeseen projects starting in July 1st, that's one available source of funding that I can think of that I can offer to you as a possibility. Other than that, I'm sort of out of ideas.
You know, one thing too, I'd like to know, or maybe hear from the Fiddletown Preservation Society, if they could contribute some funds too. I don't know where they're at on that.
We'll let them, I don't know if Alice or Beth, if one of you want to talk about that. I did ask them about grant opportunities. They had sent back a note to me that they had vetted that out. Alice Kaiser, the president of will come up and talk to you guys about the availability of extra funding or grants.
Good afternoon. We have...
Identify yourself for the...
My name's Alice Kaiser. I'm the president of the Fiddletown Preservation Society, which was founded by my parents and my grandparents. So I'm trying to carry it on. We have 4 buildings that we are in some way responsible for. 3 of them belong to the county, and we have this agreement that we will make them available to the public, maintain them on a daily basis, and seek grants for the work that needs to be done on them. And we did investigate when it became obvious that the roof was going to be the top priority on the Shuki. And we were told there's no grant money available for this project. We own a building which we were sold from the school district in '65, I believe, the one-room schoolhouse in Fiddletown. That's going to need a roof too one of these days. So although we do fundraising, we cannot set forth very much money for this project. And I strongly believe that it is the county's responsibility in addition to that fact.
Well, no, it's true, but it's just a matter of what type of roof we put on. I think a roof needs to be put on there because it's a pretty important historical building.
Yes.
We could put on a corrugated roof, something along that line, or maybe even a shingle roof, just what we put on there. And if we're going to upgrade it, I think it'd be nice if the Preservation Society could help us some on that, I would think. That's kind of where I'm coming from. Composition shingles is the cheapest way. I think that'd be really tacky.
Right. Right. No, we have a responsibility to the public now and to people in the future to take care of this building and to keep it historically accurate. And that means inside and outside. And that was when we did the work originally to restore the building, rescue it really is what it was, just like the other 2 Chinese buildings. We made sure to do that, and we need to continue doing that. So we debated very seriously the idea of putting a composition roof on and decided that we shouldn't do that, despite the fact that it's going to cost more money.
And maybe there's like a fake wood type composition roof that they're getting some of the man-made materials that are really pretty nice. I think my preference is fake roof, but it's also looking at dollars, and we got a lot of demands on county resources.
This is one of the most important buildings in this county,
I would say
historically speaking.
Very important building. Also, we got a museum, which was an important building, and we've got a lot of things to do. So that's why I was hoping you might have some funds you could help us with some.
we might be able to negotiate some, but we would expect the county to bear the great majority of the expense of this project.
Okay.
We also have restoration that needs to be done on the inside of the building, and we're looking at the necessity of hiring experts to work on that. There's fragile paper, all kinds of items in the building as well that are going to need our attention soon. So, and we haven't finished the inside of the other two buildings. And so if we go for grants, that's probably where that would go.
Sound kind of like me, got a lot of demands and a little money.
It's always that way, yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Alice. John, can you lay out what the options are? And maybe this is something that should be referred to the technical advisory committee working with the Fiddletown Museum group.
Yeah, if I was to give a board a suggestion,
Yes.
we have plenty of experience and experienced staff, including myself, with structures like this. If the board wants to take this on as a project, and because it's sort of unforeseen, it's nowhere in our list of projects, whether it's one-time monies or even any of our planned projects, I'm more than comfortable of guiding that. And if I think or believe that the cost of re-roofing a building, because to me it's a roof. It's a specialized roof, but it's a roof. It's
right.
Construction. Then I would certainly advise Chuck and see if we need to bring the matter back to the board. If not, I'm really here today to say, do you want to establish it as a project? Do you want to use that funding that I suggested for that endeavor and move on from there? And actually, when I say establish it as a project, that also means that I don't anticipate a lot of plans. There would be technical specs in the bid documents, but I wouldn't bring it back to the board to establish that project because I'm talking to you about it now. I don't think you need to approve. It's a re-roof.
Right.
It's a specialized re-roof, but it's a re-roof.
I have one question on that, John. Western Valley Construction already submitted their estimates or bids on this, but they also understand it needs to be let out to bid. So
I was very clear about that.
haven't they put themselves at a disadvantage by already putting their prices on it?
They may have. The Preservation Society had acted on that before I got involved, and they're looking for some idea to target money, which I appreciate, and the contractors seem to be willing to do that and to let that out there. So as long as we've had full disclosure of that, he understands that, so still needs to go out to bid.
How much extra would the cost relative to other two roofing options, which was the composition and the metal?
I think I had given you guys those numbers.
Yeah, I dug it out somewhere in there. It was there. I had to dig it a little bit. But I think it was about the shake. As far as composition, was like 12.5, and the metal was 15.8.
How
The
much
wood was
is-
8, and the wood was 18.4.
3, yeah, roughly.
And again, is that real wood or is that treated wood? I mean,
Well, it's all real wood, but it is
right.
chemically treated to be fire resistant.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right.
And so the shake is obviously the more cost effective, but considering the building and its construction, by the way, it's one of the very few rammed earth buildings that exist. And I don't know if you know what rammed earth is, but when they do it, it's earth, and they ram it in forms, take the forms off, and boom, there's your building. So it's sort of like a concrete building, but a very unique construction. The board, the previous boards, for as long as I've been here, I'm going on 36 years, have always been supportive of those historic structures. Wouldn't expect you guys to do anything different, so it's just a matter of whether or not you want to move forward with the project or not.
One other question I meant to ask earlier. There's some parts of the roof have problems. You think the whole roof has failed? Could it be repaired, or would that be just throwing good money after bad?
We haven't taken a good look at it. One of the first questions I will have is if there's any structural damage to that. I don't think so. The building's in pretty good shape. It's really stood the test of time quite well. But we'll take a look at that, and if I start to see an anomaly somewhere that's going to drive that cost up, I'm going to come back and see you guys.
And there was also, you talked about maybe cover the roof with plastic. I think at this point, I don't think I'd bother. I mean, December's
Oh,
here.
don't do that.
Now, I've always given you guys, while it's an alternative,
Right.
I'm not saying those alternatives are good alternatives. I'm just giving you those alternatives.
Okay.
Why don't we just give John direction to work with Fiddletown Preservation Society, and it looks like the funds are gonna have to come out of the capital projects, unforeseen projects, unless you come up with any other ideas, but doesn't appear that there's any grants available.
Well, and I will have a discussion with Alice and that group on what they can contribute as well. I heard that from the board.
I could support that for sure.
So it sounds like you'd like a motion from the board to proceed with this project?
Direction.
Yeah, some direction, yeah.
That direction.
Right, you haven't spoken.
That's, I think that's fine, but we've all decided on the wood shingle roof and that you would try to take the money from the capital budget.
Unforeseen project.
The unforeseen, which is a minor line in the capital improvement budget that we have. You know, this year we're already at about 115 of that 150, and we've got another 40 we're going to pretty much exhaust it
But
this year.
that should cover the roof, though. That
Well,
40.
next fiscal year,
Right.
July 1.
Right.
Usually we don't expend all of that every year, and I think
Is that
the budget
true,
folks roll
Mr.
stuff over.
Budget guy?
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I think the board does seem to be leaning towards the shingles. I mean, I like it myself, just aesthetic-wise and historical-wise. It probably wouldn't last as long as a tin roof unless you got some really good shingles. Something to think about. I mean, you can get metal roofs that are aged that are kind of pretty, but I don't like that idea myself. I mean, it's a thought, but I like shingles. And there is an outfit, I think, over in Balmy. It might be, I think it's Cook. I think he has sugar pine shakes, and I think they're also treated.
Yeah, and you're talking shakes, not shingles, so.
Yeah.
Shingles are the thinner manufactured. Shakes are split shake. They're made by hand. They've been around forever. They're laid over skip sheeting, which is like basically 1x4, 1x6, and there's a gap, and that's the way the roof is constructed. It's been around, that type of construction's been around forever. If you start to get into another roof like comp or metal, you're going to have to add plywood sheathing to it. It's going to add weight to it. And then I start to look into structural stuff, and I would prefer not to get into that arena.
It's something you might want to think about. Maybe I could do some legwork and investigate. I mean, I don't know if you could specify shingles from there, and you want all heart. If you did that, we probably wouldn't be back here in 30 years. You'd probably be 180 years before you ever looked at that thing again.
Yeah, it should last some time, especially with the treatments that they're doing with shakes today. They're better than just the raw shake that was put on in years past.
Rather than get into design, why don't you
Right.
work with the society and
Right,
Brian?
please. Yeah, and make sure you
Sorry.
talk
That's
to
what
Brian.
it's for.
My apology.
Okay, so you have direction.
I do. Thank you very much. Okay.
Betcha. Okay, item 6F, discussion and possible action regarding the salary paid to elected officials in Amador County. I see we have some of those here. Is one of you a spokesperson or several of you?
I can just give it a little preface.
Sure.
I wrote the staff memos in your packet. I have received the request from the 6 elected officials in the county outside of the board, and they've requested effectively the same thing the management unit got, which is effectively the same thing the rank and file got, which is a 2% and a 1% raise over the next 2 years. I will leave it to them.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we did submit that proposal to the CAO a little while ago. The details of which of our proposal was the 2% increase going back to October 1st of 17, the same as the other units had settled for. Another 1% on October 1st of 18, which is the same as the other units have negotiated for. A longevity to 10/1/17, which is the same as the county management group. The $50 deferred comp, which is the same as match, which is the same as the other groups, as well as a request for a salary survey comparison with the elected positions with the comparable counties, as well as requests for internal to our own offices with regards to compaction issues that may exist within those.
Board comments?
Well, it makes one comment. Number 4 was requesting a salary survey.
Correct.
Is that in awarding the 2% and 1%, is that foregoing the salary survey then?
Negative. Is that a trick question?
Oh, one thing I will say is I don't have a problem with the 2% and the 1%. As far as the longevity, I appreciate the longevity of a lot of our elected officials, but I have a problem doing the increase. They did that over in El Dorado, and I think they've had a lot of grief, and just I have a problem with it myself.
I think what we're asking for, Supervisors, is the same thing that everyone else gets in the county. We're not asking for anything more. We're asking for those the same numbers. And this is for total county service for the electeds.
Other comments by the board?
Well, the question is, Chuck, on the salary survey.
Well,
If we go that way, that could show substantial differences.
And it likely will, yeah. But there's it's something the staff can do pretty readily. There's only 6 positions paired. I guess the question is always, what do you do with that information once we have it?
I don't mind doing it, but that's going to be the question later. What do we do with it once we get the information? So.
Absolutely, and our request is not obligating the board to do anything other than to conduct the survey and come up and see where we stand in comparison with our counterparts.
And I assume that would be for the future, because today we're considering approving
That's correct.
increases that you asked for. Yes.
I would say back in, as far as that salary survey goes, the bigger question is internally versus externally, that there are positions underneath the elected officials. A number of them have assistants and deputies that actually make more than they do.
More than they do.
And
Yeah,
that's
that's crazy.
If, God forbid, one of these folks should get hit by a truck, their deputies wouldn't step into their positions because it would result in the loss of pay.
Yes.
Not a good situation.
Board questions?
No,
Board
but
comments?
I'm okay with the longevity. I mean, I agree. If we're going to do it for one, we should do it for the other. So.
Kind of painted ourselves. We painted a picture. We got to keep it going.
Right into it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, any public comment, question? Anybody else?
We would just need to give direction then to
Direction or a motion?
bring back an ordinance.
Their salaries are set by county ordinance, so we'll need an amendment to that ordinance.
Adopt the amended ordinance as written.
We haven't drafted one yet, so
Oh.
you'll have to tell us to.
I thought this-
Bring that to the
Right.
next meeting.
But I think the direction is to approve what the 4 points that they have asked for. Yes?
I suppose the salary survey part would not need to go into the ordinance.
No. No.
Give direction on
But we
that.
should do it, as you said, Chuck,
Well, I would,
should be fast order.
sorry, thought you were
That's
done.
right.
I would think if we're going to have a salary survey, you should probably hold off action until that comes back and you look at it. I mean,
I think we could, I had actually asked that question. I think right now if we address just the 2 and the 1, and then we can talk about what we should do about what we find in the salary survey down the road. And that wouldn't necessarily need to be retroactive to last October either. And it could, I think, be corrected going forward if it needs to be.
So what I'm understanding is that we would approve items 1, 2, and 3 for the new ordinance.
Correct.
And the salary survey will be done, but
Direct staff to do
that
number 4.
be considered.
Which counties are going to be in those?
We've got a list of counties that we typically use with rank and file and with law enforcement.
So we'll do that for all elected except for the Board of Supervisors and the county assessor. Is that right?
Definitely not the county assessor.
That's right. Always picking on the assessor.
exactly.
Just kidding.
Okay. We have direction? Go ahead, Brian.
I don't know, I do have, I understand, employees get the longevity. I just have some heartburn over doing that to giving that to elected officials also. I don't have any problem with the 2%, 1%, and probably the 50 per month. 'Cause that's what I think the employees receive too.
Okay, so does that mean we need a motion now because you're objecting to number 2?
Let me think about it.
Okay. Well, we've given direction, but we have
Yeah.
one supervisor who doesn't like one part of it.
Thinking about it.
That's where 4-1 comes in.
Yeah, I guess let's have a motion then.
Okay, so all 3, 1, 2, and 3?
And
You're okay
direction
with-
to staff for number
Right.
All right, let's move on. Similar topic. Hold on, it's item
Wait,
6. Oh, I'm
But we
sorry.
were going to have a motion, so we need a motion and then a vote.
Oh, okay. I thought we were just
I
giving
thought you
direction.
said we were just going to bring back the,
Well, I thought Lynn decided that she wanted a vote.
All right,
Well-
I'll make a motion to include items 1 through 3 in an ordinance, or direct staff to include them in an ordinance. Brought back for a vote. Salary survey over counties.
I'll second that.
Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Let's move on to item 6G. And frankly, after having just approved the salaries for our elected officials, I ask that this be put on the agenda. I would like to see our board only get increases just as the elected officials have that would match the rest of the staff.
well, in answer to that, I'll say that we already make substantially less than all of the other elected officials, and yet we're on duty, as I see it, 24/7. I mean, I can tell you most weekends, I'm just speaking personally, but Saturday of most weekends is a work day for me. And sometimes part of Sunday too, but meetings all during the day, most nights of the week. Right now, and the other thing is we approve the policies for the county, we approve the budget for all departments. Right now, I just took 2 of our elected officials. We make 52% of what the DA salary is. We make 71% of what the clerk recorder does. So, and the reason that we tied, and it could have been tied to RDA, it could have been tied to anything, but counties at the time we did it were tying them, many of them, to the Superior Court judge's salary and taking a percentage of that. We never got to the 40%, so we've locked it in at 35%. And the reason we did that is so that we would never be looking at our own salary again. If we go back and tie it to what we do with the other electeds or with SEIU, then we're right back to setting our own salary again.
Other comments?
So basically, like that decision we just made, we're gonna, if the supervisor served a long time, you'd be looking at a pretty big increase to your own salary. So I mean, I think I agree with what Richard's saying. It kind of takes a possibility of swaying a decision away from the board as far as, because you're giving this group a raise, or are you giving yourself a raise? And you're giving that group a raise, you give yourself a raise. But here it's not tied to our decisions.
Right, and it doesn't even come into play. It gives us some autonomy on making those decisions.
Autonomy is a good word, yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Other comments, Frank?
And they've kicked this around 3 different times. Chuck, I remember I was in the audience, and they never have found a reason to change it. Isn't that right?
What do you mean? Well, this was 2 years ago, I believe we put it.
Had a big discussion.
Yeah, it's been discussed a number of different times. Well, it had to be brought back every year that they deferred, that the old
That
board
was the reason, okay.
deferred, because when we were in the real lean times, the board kept pushing off the switch from the 35 to the 40%, and just kept it at 35% on the judge's salary, I think on 2011 or 2010. But that's why it kept coming back, because it had to be updated. But ultimately, I think it was last year or the year before, the change was made to leave it at 35% and to update it on an annual basis.
Yeah, that's right. The original salary ordinance always, envisioned an increase every year until you got to 40%, and then once you got to 40%, it would tie to the judge's salary. And when previous boards stopped at 35, it never captured the increases. So you were tied to the 35% of the judge's salary, going back to when that ordinance had been originally adopted, and so there were no increases. And then as the CAO indicated, board ultimately kept it at 35 and then captured the increase. That's where you are, 35% tied to the judge's salary, which is set by the average. I think it's the average increase for state employees.
You know, one thing I will say, just looking at the numbers, for 9 years, this board's salary has stayed the same, or actually, in the last 3 years, went down if you look at total net pay. So if we'd have taken a 2% increase like the employees, we'd probably be have a lot better salary right now. But I think what Pat said about as far as retaining autonomy, if you're making a decision, they can't say, you just made that to increase your pay.
Give yourself a raise, yeah.
That's not the case.
Frank?
A couple of questions. What is our raise for this year? Did we ever do a salary survey to compare with other county supervisors? And did we put some kind of governor in the way it is, but put it can only go so high, so fast? I don't know. Did we get a raise this year?
I imagine you will. We don't know what the state's doing with the judge's salary. They're very secretive on that, so we don't know yet.
Maybe we should wait until that comes out. Is that any day now, or?
I don't know.
The state is supposed to publish what that increase is, and I can't recall what the last increase amount was. Around 5%.
About 5%. Okay, so that's higher than what we're giving others, but I also hear that we're not paid as well. What do other county supervisors get in
It varies.
Is it in line with? I know it's like large counties. It's much higher.
We haven't done that recently. I don't.
Calaveras, Tuolumne would probably be.
We can do that. Put that together.
It's all over the board what supervisors get. So.
No, I understand, and I know, like in San Diego County, county supervisors is a powerful position, almost like a state senator or congressman at that point. Constituency, but I just think that we need, just make sure that we're doing the right thing. And
I think there's a lot of variables that need to be accounted for in that, though. Sure, if I was a San Diego or Stanislaus or a Contra Costa supervisor, I probably would be getting a lot more pay, but then I would probably have a staff of anywhere from 2 to 10 legislative staffers and others, administrative assistants. Right now, we are the administrative assistants, we are the ledge staff, besides getting assistance from our CAO, from our board clerk, deputy board clerk, and budget analysts. I can tell you, I write most of the letters that go to the legislature in opposition or favor for bills. I don't necessarily like doing that, but maybe I should get a stipend for being a legislative assistant too.
Actually, you write a pretty good letter.
I just, while we have this opportunity, let's make sure that we're doing the right thing. And, what other county supervisors are getting paid in the area. Should we keep the system but keep a cap so that it can only go so high so fast? Or I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
You might be right, because you look at what the board made in 2008-9 was basically stayed the same for like 9 years. Out of sight.
Okay, well,
And no longevity.
Oh, that would
Hey,
be
the voters
inappropriate.
decide that one.
Yeah, really.
Though some of the other officials are elected, they're not contested as are.
Any public comment? None.
Could we make a motion just to leave it as it is and move on?
I would prefer not to. I'd prefer just
Let's do a salary survey. Let's see what
look
they
at the survey data.
So you want to bring it back to a future board meeting?
Pleasure of the board. But if you would like me to do a salary survey, I will. We'll get that done.
Direction from the board?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. We'll bring the question back to the next meeting. Okay. Item 6H, SB1 project list. That's why Jared is here.
We can look at these next two items kind of hand in
Together.
hand. They really
Okay.
do go hand
Sure.
in hand.
Okay.
It's the Public Works budget and the project list for SB1.
Right.
But the project list does need to be completed this meeting because it is due to the state by May 1st.
Okay.
So we do need a decision on that, and then we can kind of roll into the Public Works budget, however you would like to do that.
Still morning, so good morning.
Just barely.
Good ranking with Public Works, and Stacy Link is also here with Public Works. So the first item here is 6H, just like Chuck mentioned. It's our project list for SB1 fiscal year 18-19. It's due to the state by May 1st, so we have about another week after this meeting to complete their forms and list the identified projects so they can kind of keep track of what we're doing with the SB1. So what you have in front of you in the staff report, I did a summary on the front page, and I'll just step through basically the revenues and expenditures just generally, and then we can probably go down into the project list as you wish. So currently right now, for this round of SB1 in fiscal year 18-19, we have a total, there's basically three items that are going to, three revenue sources that are going to comprise our SB1 revenues. First one is about $1.5 million in the road maintenance and rehabilitation account that we expect to receive this coming fiscal year starting August.
Was that did you downgrade that from the original amount? Because I remember in our last meeting, they had downgraded the amount for this year.
This is the current projected, so it's not downgraded. We haven't received any new estimates since January, February. So this is the number that they provided to us before. So,
Potentially, because I know their recommendation was to be conservative in your estimate.
that's correct. So we'll, yeah, this whole SB1 process, it's going to be a little fluid. We're coming here initially today for the initial project list, but we'll probably have to come back again and discuss any changes that need to be made, whether it's due to revenues, less or more, or increase or decrease in projects that we're going to do.
And that's if SB1 is not repealed in November.
That's correct. So we have a couple months, and we'll see what happens. So, but right now, this is the task we have before us. So yes, the 1.5 million is the main amount of the SB1 money coming from the state. It's the RMRA, and then there's also a little piece of the SB1 is the 106,000 is the cost or the loan repayment. That's also a part of the SB1.
What loan is that?
Part of that triple flip that they did.
Oh, okay.
It's the part of the true-up process.
Okay.
Money basically stated borrowed out of the road funds, diverted, whatever you want to call it.
But then also in the staff report, we have $600,000 of the one-time money that was contributed by the Board of Supervisors that we're counting as part of our SB1 projects. So you see, that's the revenues that we have coming in for SB1, and then directly below it, you have our proposed expenditures list broken out by, we have 5 categories. First one, we're continuing on with county road digouts, replacing localized areas that are in pretty severe distress. Those are account for about $1.6 million of the projected expenditures in the project list. Then we have planned $125,000 worth of striping on county roads. There's about 30 roads or so that we're going to be restriping for next fiscal year. And then we have the $124,000 in culvert replacement. I believe there's 7 culverts that we identified last year. Yes.
I thought we done.
Okay.
Culverts.
Yeah, that we identified last year that we couldn't get to this year because we didn't have enough money in SB1. So those were moved to 18-19, and then we have about $100,000 identified for crack filling and sealing, just on all county roads, and then we've set aside $300,000 for minor repairs on county roads. Those would be potholes and minor patching and other items on the roadside we may have to replace. So this all totals for the total SB1 program this next year. A little over $2.2 million.
Jared, I would appreciate, just because I've forgotten what list we approved for this fiscal year. Because I had asked you the other day about a striping needed on
Happen to have it
one
with
of the roads. And what's that?
Got it with you.
Oh, there you go.
So here's a list we submitted last August.
Okay.
I'll go through it real quick.
Real quick, yeah.
So there was a digouts component. We have some digouts on Clinton Road, Comanche Road, Meadow Drive, and Fiddletown Road. And then I think there was another road in there. It's not shown on this list. We had a 5th road. But anyways, we have striping on Meadow Drive, Shake Ridge Road, Fiddletown Road, Buena Vista Road, Comanche Parkway, Pine Grove Volcano, Pioneer Volcano, Old Sacramento, Shenandoah, Climax, Irishtown, and then we also had the culverts I mentioned. The culverts are culvert replacement repair on Sutter Creek Road, 2 on Martin Lane, 1 on Clinton Road, and 2 on Stony Creek, and actually a new culvert on Latrobe Road, and then one more on Clinton Road. The last item we had for fiscal year 17-18 was also the crack filling. We're spending about $30,000, I believe, in crack filling this year.
How many do you have on Comanche Road?
For culverts?
No, for dig-outs.
Dig-outs.
$8 maybe.
Yeah, we had about 2,100 square feet. I think there was about 6
actual locations.
That's one of the areas I get the most complaints on. I can tell you there's probably about 20 places that could be dug out.
Sorry. But what progress, how's your progress on those, given that we've only got a few months in this fiscal year?
So the dig out projects is currently out to bid for
Okay.
all locations. So there's 41 total. We estimated at about 300,000, so we're receiving bids, expecting to receive bids back May 15th.
Okay.
So
What about the striping?
Striping hasn't gone out yet, but it should be going out to bid here in probably about a month or less.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, the new culvert you talked about in the 17, 18?
Yeah.
Is that one of the Latrobe where it's always blowing out down by the river to solve that issue? Hopefully?
Yeah, it's the one right there by the tree. Install it right by the tree. So
It fell over?
did it fall over?
Well,
The one next to the road? Yeah. Well, anyway, so there's a wash that comes in off the hill, off the property and comes into the road, and then
okay, that's that one that's blowing out the ditch basically and causing road problems.
yeah. So we're gonna catch that runoff before it accumulates even more. So there'll still be some in that ditch area, but it'll be less. So should fix the problem.
One more thing I think I'd like to, a couple more things. One is I'm a little bit worried about our ditches. I know you guys haven't had enough funding. I'm not throwing nothing at you. You're doing the best you can. But I think our ditch cleaning and our culvert cleaning was a little bit remiss this year, and I want to make sure we got money to get that done because it's really very important. Going to be funding in somewhere in one of these budgets for doing that?
Yeah, we can. Yes.
Okay.
We'll maybe dive in a little more during the budget discussion.
Okay. And also, I think I think it's spoken to you. I had a little bit of heartburn over some of the dig outs, or at least how much money is being allocated to some of the roads, because there's a lot of roads in pretty bad shape. And I went up and drove that road, actually Buckhorn Ridge Road last night, because it's getting probably about 40% of the funding roughly. And there's roads I think I think it's a minor collector. There's minor collectors that probably have worse issues than Buckhorn Ridge. So I just want to make it clear that this is like a list we're sending to the state, but that's not saying this list can't be modified. I just want to make that clear.
Can't add or subtract. I mean, we can't add new roads to this list for this
Well,
year.
that's the list we have to work off,
List we
right?
have to
That's the list we have to work on, but we can add projects and take projects off.
You can amend it.
Yeah.
Oh,
amend
we
it.
can,
Yeah, we
okay.
can.
Because I know it's going to need to be amended, because you know it too, because Buena Vista Road will probably have reconstruction because of the casino. So hopefully that'll mean we don't have to do anything to it in the future next year.
The Buena Vista segment on here is right next to the county line, Calaveras County line. It won't be part of the reconstruction.
Won't be. Okay, so then what, on Stony Creek Road?
Yeah.
Why are we devoting so much money on Stony Creek Road? I drove that yesterday. I had one motorcycle go past me the whole length of the road. There's like 15 people max that live on that road. I think do a little bit and you devote the rest of it to roads like Comanche and Kern in the district that get extensive travel.
The Comanche and Kern are on the list. So what we did, and I tried to explain it last meeting, was we wanted to have an objective criteria. It's kind of one of those things, you got to start somewhere with these repairs, and there's just so much work to do. You can't say, well, where do you start? So where we started was collector roads with the lowest PCIs and the relatively higher ADTs. Now, I don't have an exact equation. I could put the road in and tell me which one would be the higher priority, Curran or Comanche, but did use a little bit of a judgment. So with Curran and Comanche, there's going to be a lot of construction out there this year. So although there are some locations that are in bad shape, I didn't want to move forward with doing extensive work on those areas until we basically see the totality of any future damage, further damage that's going to happen this summer with the casino project, and also JVID's coming through with their pipe project, their water project there. So I want to see what happens and start on those next year.
Okay, we can look at amendments, but I just don't believe in putting a lot of money into, you want to maintain the road as well as you can, but, I mean, I'm getting the calls on Kern and on Comanche, and I'm not getting the calls on Stony Creek. I think those people just want to left alone out there, and the less people that travel the road, the better. And I can tell you, there's not many people traveling it now.
No, and if you look at the numbers, you're right, Rich. There's like 295 people on Stony Creek Road, was a number. Yeah, about 295.
295 cows. I don't know about people. So.
I mean, vehicles. Pardon me.
All
but no, I agree with what Richard's saying, because I'm getting a lot of calls like off of Fiddletown Road. And I know we're doing some work with the dig outs. There's some included here. And Shake Ridge has some issues, and just as long as we can modify this list, it sounds like we can. This is a work in progress, so.
But we do need to approve it today.
Yep.
Yeah, but just as a point, they had the home tour at my house. I was kicked out of my house Saturday, so I just took this list and drove all of those roads. And I was wondering about Buckhorn Ridge. I think Shake Ridge Road is worse shape than Buckhorn Ridge, unless I didn't go far enough on it. It's only about a 4-mile road, isn't it?
Two and a half?
Comes out there at Pioneer Park, or did I miss the other parcel?
There's a little piece of it after Pioneer Park.
The biggest thing that we had with Pioneer Creek, or with Buckhorn Ridge, was the last 2 years ago, we had the accident where the truck destroyed Highway 88. So all of the traffic was
Went on
diverted
Buckhorn.
onto
They'll
that
put
road.
unnatural stress on it. Okay, I mean, I'm just driving
Unnatural
around.
stress that was,
Yeah.
But
so
if I was going to fix one, Hale Road would probably be near the top of my list, from the creek up to the top of that next hill.
unfortunately, it was hay hauling season when that happened.
Oh,
So-
okay.
So
Thank you for that clarification.
I understand that there's a lot of roads that need fixing. You know, this is a 10-year program. We got a lot of work to do. These happen to be the roads that, on our list, the segments that we looked at were the worst rated. So that's why we started there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can understand that. It may be the worst rated. All I know is when I drive over a road and I get this, and I look at the rating on Buckhorn Ridge didn't quite correlate with some of my personal ratings driving down some other roads. That's all.
Okay, let me open it up to public comment. Gary?
Gary Reinell, a country resident, and I drive a lot of the roads. I try to keep abreast of the condition of our roadways, and I fully understand that we have to have a list that reflects some sort of standards. And I'm going to make comments like you. Yeah, there are some roads or sections of roads that I would much prefer to see done than some of them that I see on the list. But on the other hand, I have not done an extensive analysis. Jared and his staff has. And so today I guess please just approve what he's presenting before you, and perhaps we can continue to look at some of the other areas that may need some more immediate help, so that there could be some changes during the year. But let's move forward, and hopefully SB1 will stay as a funding source for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Did the recall effort get placed on the ballot for SB1?
The signature period ended yesterday, so I didn't hear.
Okay, I know this will come back for amendments, and we'll see, like you say, what it looks like after you do the work out there. But you work on doing your analysis and working on the sections that are the worst. I work on part of that, but on the other part, I work on how many complaints I get on sections of roads. So we'll see what happens after some of the improvements are done.
Yeah, one more thing I'd like to note.
Okay.
So, we estimated these projects, roughly. So, we're hoping that, I want to see what happens with the dig out project we have going now with the bid prices, to see how much it actually is going to cost a contractor to jump around the county and do these dig outs at certain locations. So hopefully the numbers look favorable and we can take a look at these costs and see maybe we could do more. So it's, like I said, it's kind of a fluid process, we just kind of got to work through it. So I understand all your comments.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
quite honestly, I mean, SB1 helps, but if you look at the shape of our roads, not enough. I mean, we've got delayed maintenance going back a lot of years. County went through the recession, depression, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, you got to start someplace, and the
Yep.
key is without SB1, we're really going to be
We have
in
nothing.
the hole. I would move to adopt a resolution authorizing adoption of Senate Bill 1 project list for fiscal year 18-19.
Got second by Supervisor Crew. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have our list. Thank you. Do you want to go through your budget now?
Yes.
Supervisors, it's my intention that this take the place of Public Works' appearance at the budget workshop that we're having on May 15th.
Oh.
So that we could just, I figured it all went together. So their budget is in, it's been submitted, we've been through it. And any questions that you might have, if you do want them to come back, feel free to ask them back. I was just trying to leave us a little time because that workshop always gets a little crunched, and this would allow us to spend a little bit more time on the Public Works budget than we have during that workshop.
My question is that Fiddletown, Shenandoah Road, Fiddletown project, you're going to need to increase the budget for that project?
Shouldn't be. We haven't done anything. It's been waiting to go to construction for about a year. Let's see.
So the grading is standalone, that's on its own then, the budget increase there?
Budget 3021, the Plymouth Fiddletown project is just, it's its own project that he's not asking for an increase. The contract for that was signed last year, and the contractor, we gave them the option of waiting till spring to get started, and they are starting.
So there's no change to that project right now?
No. Yeah, I'm looking at the budget actually last year we adopted. So we're looking at 3021 right now. Looks like we adopted $2,231,000, and this year we're only requesting a little over $2 million. I believe that's because our bids last year came in lower than we anticipated, which was good news at the time. So.
Another question. Do you have? I'm looking for it. You mentioned about a new asphalt zipper.
Yes.
Was funding under? I'm looking for the funding. Would it be in like vehicles, or like the heavy equipment fund?
That's out of GSA's budget. So, yeah, that's not included in ours. It's included in GSA. So,
Right, couldn't find. So there is funding for zipper then, or?
Yeah. So we have 3 pieces of equipment that'll be included in the GSA's budget. One being the zipper for about $25,000, I think is what we estimated. And then we want to get a mini excavator, requesting for about $100,000, and then a skid steer, which is like a little mini tractor shovel.
Bobcat, basically.
Yeah, Bobcat. And that'll help us with our some of the SB1 work we're going to be doing.
That maintenance of effort, this still kind of confuses me. I thought we were going to be able to put some of this in the roads, but that's all for staffing costs?
Well, let me go through some of the main points here, and then we can jump into everything. So let me just present the budget. I'm just going to go just to tell you the amounts and the increase or decrease from last year, and then I have some comments I want to share with you at the end. Okay, so overall, the 3,000 budget, which is our main public works budget, for fiscal year 18-19 requested is $7,800,549. That represents a actual decrease from last year of about 3.7%. Primary factor there is we have a decrease in our FEMA projects. It's good and bad news, if you know, depending on how you look at it. Within the overall budget, our total salaries, total salary line for fiscal year 18-19 is $2,334,206. That's a 5.1% increase over last year.
Is there a specific page you're on?
I'm just going off my notes. So, they have the budget in front of them.
Yeah, you should have the,
But it has quite a few pages. So.
Yeah.
look at the budget number 3,000,
Yeah.
9 pages long.
Yes, got it. I'm just going through it and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm with you.
The top right says Public Works 3,000. That's the one.
Yes.
So, under salaries,
It's page 111 in your packet.
Basically, like second page in.
it's,
Second page from the front.
so there's an increase there for under salaries from this year, from last year of 5.1%. Primary factors there are retirement costs. Unfunded liability went up $39,642, and then I think because of the raises, salaries went up about $66,000. For total services and supplies this year, requested budget is $1,111,463. That's a net increase of 17.5% from last year. The big items there under that group of items that cause for the increase are our equipment and maintenance costs rose about $50,000. We have tires and other parts that need to be replaced on our fleet equipment. It's just one of those things we can't defer, or else we can't drive and operate our vehicles out there on the road. Second item, which was a big increase from last year, is the professional services line. That increased $99,000. That piece of the budget may or may not be used. It just depends on how busy we get. If any emergency comes up where we need specialized services, then we would need to use that. It'll also be used for, we need to do new traffic counts on our roads so we can adequately identify, which ones are the most busy segments. So our existing inventory, I guess if you want to call it that, of traffic counts is about 10 years old, so we need to spend some money to update those.
What'd you have down for the unprofessional specialized services?
Was an increase of $99,000.
So how much is that the amount? Okay, so you're looking at.
Like I said, I'm hoping we don't have to use any of it. This summer and into the fall might get pretty busy for us. We have some projects that are out. I have to be out in the field this summer, and so does some of our other staff. If we get more busy before we're able to backfill my old position, then it's possible we might need to use on-call services to provide the services to developers or any other kind of service we need to provide.
So what you're requesting for this budget is $148,250.
Yes. Okay, and then last major item in the 3,000 budget for expenditures are our special funded projects. This year we're looking at a total of about $3,144,000. It's a net increase of about 5%. Factors there are we have an increase in SB1 over last year. The SR 88 project, we're moving to the right-of-way phase, so it requires us to commit more money for right-of-way services, but then also it counterbalances with our old projects that we've cleared out, will be in New York Ranch Road and some of the other projects that were in our line items from last year. So,
Hey, Jared,
yes. Yes, so we've included, it was included in the budget last year, Wicklow Way, so it's the segment of Wicklow Way extension from basically where Walmart up to Hoffman. So that was something that the ACTC and County Public Works wanted to look at. We just didn't get to it last year because of basically the storms and how busy things got. We just couldn't go out and.
What's that money for?
It's to do preliminary engineering, look at potential alignment and do some survey and maybe some preliminary environmental analysis. You know, that's about as far as we're going to take it right now. I still need to go talk to Mr. Gedney up at ACTC about exactly how we want to proceed beyond that. But that was a project we wanted to take a look at. So that's included in this budget for I think $75,000, I believe is the amount.
70, yeah.
70, yeah.
Is that funding from ACTC or?
Yeah, it's RSTP funds, so come directly out of our sources. So, you know, so in terms of generally the revenues, we're seeing a small decrease in the HUDA funds this year, about $10,000. Our total that we get in the HUDA, the gas tax, is 1.6 million. So if you look at the 1.6 million in HUDA gas tax, which is basically should cover our operating expenses, or at least a portion of it, you can see our total salaries are 2.3 million, so we only receive 1.6 million in HUDA funds. So that's what causes some problems for us with trying to find additional revenues. There was an increase this year in SB1 of about $1 million, and an increase in the MOE from the Board of Supervisors of about $815,000. Majority of the other revenues stay the same.
That MOE, though, is going mainly to staff? To pay for staff?
We don't really connect it to staff, but yeah, it would go help to pay for some staff. And so staff, we have five in the office? 5 in the office and 16 in the road department. So not supporting a large staff here. So more comments. So generally on the expenditures, as some notes here, I just want to read off just kind of my take on what I see in the budget. So salary and wage costs are expected to continue to increase again next year, mainly due to retirement costs continually increasing. Equipment replacement and maintenance will likely still increase, not decrease over the coming years. Expenditures for local capital, road projects, new construction, and safety are not proposed in this budget. So in the past, we've always had a couple safety projects, New York Ranch Road, Turnout Project, Fiddletown, Fiddletown Shenandoah, even though it's in another budget line. Now, if the board wanted to, we could set aside some money out of our local traffic mitigation fee program for some seed money for a project if we wanted to do that. The ACTC right now is looking at a couple options, well, not a couple, many options for potential safety projects within the county. So I hadn't made a decision on whether or not we wanted to pursue any of those or not yet, but it's up to your discretion whether or not you want to direct us to at least set aside some money in this next year's budget to potentially participate. Our special funded projects are now generally exclusively repair and rehab, road and bridge. So if you look at our special funded projects, all our bridge projects are replacement or rehab, and then our road projects mainly consist of our SB1 repair and maintenance. We have only 2 other projects, the SR88 Pine Grove project and the Wicklow Way project, that are not really in that classification. Our operating expenses, salaries and services and supplies continue to exceed the established permanent revenue sources like HUDA, and what else we got, forest reserves and some of those other sources. On the revenue side, special revenue sources will continue to be needed to be sought out to maintain our current operating levels. There's just generally just not enough and consistent, dependable revenues to come in. So we're going to continue to look at that. There's over the next year and beyond, we'll see a significant reduction in the federal grant revenue used to offset our operating expenses. Basically, our staff time last couple of years, we've had these HSIP projects that have helped us do in-house design, et cetera, which have offset some of our costs contributed. And then our SB1 revenue will be used to offset operating expenses for road department, similar to our past federal grants, to offset our office staff time for project development costs. Our road department is going to perform a portion of the maintenance work funded by SB1 in the coming years. So, through my notes, and this is my general overview.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
The 47,960 state and roads, Indian gaming, you don't show anything. That, you show something for base budget for 1920 and 2021. I guess, let me see if I can follow my line across. You don't show anything for the next year, so those monies that came in from the Buena Vista Casino project, where are they right now?
I believe it's $75,000 that is committed to go towards roads. So we haven't identified what to do with that yet, but that will be.
$75,000 only goes to Coal Mine Road, I believe, is what it was.
But wasn't there other money for roads that came in? There are other checks?
Oh, you're talking about the impact fees?
The mitigation
Yeah,
dollars.
that's the ACTC and the local.
So will our Public Works Department be working with ACTC to make sure that money is dedicated to take care of the impacts?
Well, so the impact fee portion of the Buena Vista question is still up in the air.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
So that's just the expenditure of those funds will happen through the ACTC's station of projects of the regional traffic plan. The local fee, they'll have a dispute about whether they need to pay that fee, which we'll have to talk about separately.
How much would the local fee be if they paid it?
It is $1.2 million.
Why is there a dispute on that?
The tribe has a dispute. We think the ISA is fairly clear.
So that could be one that ends up in further discussions.
Yes.
What else? We can go to somebody else. Find my other question.
Anybody else?
I guess on the bridge projects, the Bunker Hill Bridge project is basically, it's done.
There's a plan establishment period, but yeah, it's done.
We're not doing too much work on a lot of bridge replacement projects, then, it looks like.
Well, we have, the next one is Fiddletown Road Bridge. We're going to be moving into the right-of-way acquisition there. I actually have the agreements at my office. I just haven't had a chance to put them on the agenda yet. So.
Under line 45630 FEMA storm damage projects, we've just got a disaster declaration for the last round of storms in March, so would you be estimating any money to be received off that, or do you do it the other way around? You don't estimate, you wait till we get the money for FEMA damage?
Well, I'll have to talk to Caltrans about that. Yes, we got the declaration, and our hope would be that, if we could receive some assistance for any, unforeseen damage at Shake Ridge Road, then we would. But I still have to have the discussion with them. Haven't had a chance to have it yet.
I can tell you from past experience that we've had many public works directors and staff. Some have put in the full request, some put in a minimal request, and my experience is you're better off asking for as much as you can get and let FEMA say no.
Yeah.
And are we still, on that issue, are we still negotiating with the contractors?
Well, I think that's a question for Greg.
Okay. Well, maybe it's not a public question. Yeah. Okay. We'll talk about it in closed session.
And it looks like you've got funding to, what, is that to repair Pioneer Creek Road, the $252,000?
Yeah, so we have, there's 3 FEMA projects that are separate from the Shake Ridge. And 3 of them, Pioneer Creek, and then, 4. Pioneer Creek, and then there's 2 on Pioneer Volcano, and then 1 on Sutter Creek. So Pioneer Creek, we have to do a little bit of we had to go back to Cal OES to get a change on the cost. They had originally, last summer when they did their field work, just told us we could put some fill down there and fix the road, but we've been there, it's a pretty good drop there, so we're trying to change the scope to install a retaining wall. So
Kind of some tough soil there too, I think. Steve.
Other questions? So Chuck, would you like us to actually approve this budget?
No, just direction to staff is, you don't have to take a vote and approve it. Just direction to staff to include what's been submitted here or any changes that you want, and it will be included in the final or the preliminary budget that's approved to you for approval. That's presented to you for approval in June.
Okay. All right.
He probably won't have to come to the budget workshop then.
Unless you have any further questions or anything else you'd like to
Something
change.
changes between now and then,
Well,
sure.
I don't have a question, but at some point it may be useful for you to write at some point in the future, write a letter to the editorial or something on where the SB1 money is going, how much we put into the roads, how much is projected for next year. Don't make it too complicated, but just the necessity of getting this money and the improvements that are being done because of it. I want to try and for education purposes to the public.
Okay, we'll do.
Karen, are you satisfied with everything?
Okay, any other questions? Thanks very much to both of you.
Thank you.
Oh, do we need to go over the grading or?
Yeah, did you have any questions? I think the Fiddletown budget was okay, but grading was also in there. Did you take a look at that as well, since we do go budget by budget? And grading is considered one of the Public Works' budget, although that is a general funded budget.
I don't have too many comments on, I don't have any comments on grading, actually. We don't take in that much, and it's dedicated to staff review, so.
There's not much there, 36,000.
I'm okay with it. I just don't want to see any change orders down the road and south on it.
Oh.
That's what seems to happen to these projects, and then we're asked to come out of the general fund or contingency to put in a bunch more money.
I understand.
Other questions?
Oh, thank you.
All right, let's go into close.
How about the minutes?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, we need to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes with minor corrections. I've already submitted to Jennifer, but there was one, I think on the, what was the second to last page, where Jared made a presentation and there was no header, so it was hard to see what he was presenting on. I think it just needs to be included in the minutes, what his presentation was on.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Then I had a question of Frank went out of the room, Frank went in the room, Frank went out of the room, Frank went in the room, but Jennifer said that's what Frank did, so.
Frank at the direction of his colleague, who I won't mention.
Yeah, I was
Oh, you better leave now.
I'd move to approve the minutes with
He was trying to look out for me. So
minor
public safety.
minor corrections with the one inclusion of what Jared was presenting on.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Let's go into closed session. Board adjourned.